6 months pregnant, abandoned by her husband, and carrying lies heavier than the child in her belly, Clara Whitmore stepped off the stagecoach into the scorching Wyoming sun with one last chance at survival, a mail-order marriage built on deception. But when the massive, scarred rancher waiting on the porch demanded the truth, she had seconds to decide: confess everything and risk being cast out into the wilderness, or double down on the lies that brought her here. With her 5-year-old son clinging to her skirt and nowhere else to go, Clara chose honesty and waited for Cole Granger to send her away. Before we begin Clara's journey of redemption and second chances in the unforgiving heat of the Wyoming territory, please take a moment to like this video and comment below with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's step into the dust and desperation of Granger Creek Ranch. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of red dust that seemed to hang suspended in the breathless afternoon heat. Clara Whitmore braced herself against the worn wooden seat, one hand pressed protectively over the swell of her belly, the other reaching instinctively for Benny. Her son had finally fallen asleep against her shoulder somewhere past the last relay station, his small body limp with exhaustion after 3 days of bone-rattling travel across the Wyoming territory. Through the grimy window, she could see the ranch house, a sturdy structure of weathered timber and stone, larger than she'd expected, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grassland shimmering under the brutal July sun, broken only by scattered cottonwoods marking what must be the creek Cole Granger had mentioned in his letters. Her letters. The ones she'd written under lamplight in a Kansas City boarding house, carefully choosing every word, every detail. The widow of a good man taken by fever, a respectable woman fallen on hard times, a mother seeking safety and a fresh start for her young son. All lies. Well, not all of them. She was indeed a mother. She was seeking safety, and she desperately needed a fresh start. But she was no widow. "Ma'am?" The driver's weathered face appeared at the window, startling her. "This is Granger Creek Ranch. You getting out, or you wanting to go back to town?" The question hung in the suffocating air. Going back to town meant the boarding house where the proprietor had already made it clear that a woman in her condition, alone with a child and no husband in sight, was not welcome beyond the week she'd already paid for. Going back meant admitting defeat, returning to Kansas City where her family had washed their hands of her the moment her husband Samuel rode out with his gambling debts and his mistress, leaving Clara with nothing but shame and a baby on the way. "I'm getting out." Her voice came steadier than she felt. Benny stirred as she shifted him, his eyes opening in that confused, vulnerable way of children waking in unfamiliar places. "Mama?" "We're here, sweetheart. Our new home." The words felt like tempting fate, but she forced a smile for him as the driver opened the door. The heat struck her like a physical blow, thick, dry, relentless. It had been hot in Kansas City, but this was different. This was heat that made the horizon waver, that pulled moisture from your skin and left your lips cracked within hours. Clara climbed down carefully, her movements awkward with the weight of her pregnancy and the constraints of her travel-stained dress. The driver handed down their bags, 2 worn carpet bags that contained everything they owned in the world, and then the wooden crate with her few precious books and Benny's toy soldiers. "Good luck to you, ma'am," the driver said, tipping his hat. There was something in his tone, pity, perhaps, or doubt. He'd been hired in town to bring her out here, and he'd been silent for most of the journey, but she'd caught him glancing at her belly more than once. Before she could respond, the front door of the ranch house opened. Cole Granger filled the doorway like he filled his letters, with an overwhelming, undeniable presence. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His shirt was rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with old scars. Dark hair touched his collar, and several days' worth of beard shadowed a face that might have been handsome if not for the deep lines carved by weather and something harder, grief perhaps or anger long held. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, intense, and fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. He stepped onto the porch, his boots heavy on the wooden planks, and descended the 3 steps to the dusty yard. Up close, he was even more imposing, broad and solid and radiating a barely contained energy that made Clara's heart hammer against her ribs. His gaze moved from her face to her belly, and something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Confusion. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was deep, rough around the edges, like a man who didn't waste words on pleasantries. Mr. Granger. She fought to keep her voice level, her chin raised despite the panic rising in her chest. She'd known this moment would come, had rehearsed it during the endless hours in the stagecoach. But standing here in the crushing heat with his dark eyes cataloging every detail, her carefully prepared words scattered like dust in the wind. You didn't mention in your letters that you were expecting. Not an accusation exactly, but not welcoming either. Behind her, the stagecoach driver cleared his throat, clearly eager to be gone. Benny pressed against her skirt, and Clara felt his small hand grip the fabric. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort for him and strength for herself. No, she said quietly. I didn't. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the restless stamping of the stagecoach horses and the endless chirping of cicadas in the grass. The driver shifted his weight, making the coach creak. Cole's jaw tightened. He glanced past her at the waiting stagecoach, then back to her face. You want to tell me why? This was it. The moment of truth. She could continue the deception, tell him the child was her late husband's, a final gift before fever took him. He might believe it. He might accept it. But Clara had built her life on lies for too long. Samuel's lies about his debts, about where he went at night, about the woman he was seeing, her own lies to her family, to her friends, to herself. Lies that had led her to this dusty ranch in the middle of nowhere with nothing but hope and desperation. She was tired of lying. Because I was afraid you wouldn't accept me if you knew the truth. Something shifted in Cole's expression, a crack in the stern facade. He studied her for a long moment, then looked down at Benny. The boy stared back at him with wide, wary eyes. What's your name, son? Benny glanced up at Clara, seeking permission. She nodded slightly. Benjamin, sir, but everyone calls me Benny. Benny. Cole's voice gentled fractionally. You look after your mama? The boy straightened, trying to appear older than his 5 years. Yes, sir. I'm the man of the family now. Pain flashed across Cole's face so quickly, Clara almost missed it. He crouched down, bringing himself to Benny's eye level despite his size. That's a heavy job for someone your age. You tired? Benny's brave facade crumbled a little. Yes, sir. Long trip? 3 days. The coach bounced a lot. I bet it did. Cole straightened, his gaze returning to Clara. Driver, help me get their things onto the porch. The driver complied with obvious relief, clearly grateful for the excuse to complete his business and leave. Within minutes, their meager belongings sat on the wide porch. The stagecoach was turning in a wide circle, and the sound of hoofbeats was fading into the distance. Clara stood in the yard, Benny still pressed against her side, facing the man she'd traveled 1,000 miles to marry under false pretenses. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath her dress. You're not a widow, are you? Cole's question was direct, almost gentle. No. Your husband? Left me. 6 months ago. Took his mistress and whatever money he could scrape together, left me with debts, and she touched her belly. This. Cole's expression hardened, but the anger wasn't directed at her. What kind of man? He stopped himself, shaking his head. Doesn't matter what kind. He's a coward and a fool. The unexpected defense made her throat tight. I should have told you in my letters. I know that. But I had nowhere else to go, and Benny needed... Her voice broke. Come inside. Cole's tone was firm, but not unkind. It's too hot to have this conversation in the yard. Boy looks like he's about to fall over. He was right. Benny's face was flushed, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Clara nodded, and Cole gathered their bags with ease, carrying them toward the house. She followed with Benny, her heart pounding. The interior was dim and blessedly cooler, with thick stone walls and windows positioned to catch any breath of breeze. The main room was spacious, with a large stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and an overall sense of masculine practicality. No delicate touches, no woman's hand evident anywhere. It had been 3 years, Cole's letters had said, since he lost his wife and daughter. 3 years, and the house still felt empty of them. Cole set the bags down and gestured to a sofa covered in worn leather. Sit, I'll get you water. Clara sank onto the sofa, and Benny immediately climbed up beside her, leaning against her side. She stroked his hair absently, watching as Cole moved to a large ceramic pitcher on a sideboard. He poured 2 glasses and brought them over, handing one to her and crouching down to offer the other to Benny. "Drink slow," he told the boy. "Too fast and you'll make yourself sick in this heat." Benny nodded and obeyed, sipping carefully. Clara drank gratefully, the water cool and sweet. Creek water, she guessed, from the source Cole had mentioned that made this ranch so valuable. Cole settled into a chair across from them, his large frame making the furniture seem small. He was silent for a moment, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, seen in a way she hadn't been in years. "I wrote to you because I need help running this ranch," he said finally. "I've got good land, good water, and a solid operation, but I can't do it alone anymore. My ranch hand Silas does what he can, but we need stability, a household that functions, someone to manage the domestic side while we handle the stock and the land." Clara nodded, following his reasoning even as her chest tightened with anxiety about where this was leading. "I also wrote because I'm tired of being alone." The admission came reluctantly, as if he wasn't accustomed to acknowledging such things. "This house is too quiet. Has been for 3 years. I thought a wife, a companion, someone to share the work and the days with, that might be good for both of us." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze direct. "But I was honest with you in my letters, Clara. I told you about my wife and daughter. I told you I'm not an easy man, that this life is hard, that I've got enemies in town who'd like nothing better than to see me lose this ranch. I gave you the truth, even the ugly parts." Shame burned in her chest. "I know. You were honest and I wasn't. I'm sorry. Why should I believe anything you tell me now?" The question was fair, and it cut deep. "Because I have nothing left to lose by telling you the truth. Because I'm tired of lying, to you, to myself, to everyone. Because—" She looked down at Benny, who was fighting sleep against her shoulder. "Because my son deserves better than a mother who builds her life on deception." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Tell me everything, the real story." So she did. She told him about Samuel, the charming man who'd courted her with poetry and promises, who'd seemed so different from the practical farmers and merchants her parents had hoped she'd marry. She told him about the first year of marriage, when the cracks began to show. The nights he didn't come home, the money that disappeared, the debts that accumulated. She told him about discovering the affair, about the confrontation that led to Samuel hitting her for the first and only time, about waking the next morning to find him gone and a note on the table. "Can't be tied down anymore. You'll manage." She told him about the pregnancy she discovered 2 weeks later, about her family's horror and shame, about being asked to leave the family home because she was an embarrassment, about the months in Kansas City trying to find work while her belly grew, watching doors close in her face, seeing disgust in the eyes of respectable women. "I saw your advertisement in the newspaper," she said quietly. "Rancher seeking wife for domestic partnership in Wyoming territory. Honest work for honest companionship. And I thought, maybe this could be my chance. A new place where no one knew me, where I could start over." "So you lied." "So I lied." She met his gaze steadily. "And I'm not proud of it. But I won't apologize for trying to survive, for trying to give my son a life that didn't involve watching his mother slowly starve or sell herself in some back alley boarding house." Benny had fallen asleep against her, his breathing deep and even. Clara adjusted him carefully, cradling his weight. Cole stood and paced to the window, staring out at the sun-drenched land. His broad shoulders were tense, his hands curled into loose fists at his sides. Clara waited, her heart hammering, prepared for him to tell her to gather her things, to wait on the porch until someone could take them back to town. "I lost my wife and daughter 3 years ago," he said without turning around. "House fire. Started in the middle of the night. I got out. They didn't." Clara's breath caught at the pain in his voice. "For a long time, I wanted to die too. Silas kept me going, kept the ranch running when I couldn't think straight. But the guilt—" He turned to face her, and she saw it there in his eyes. The same kind of raw, desperate pain she felt when she thought about the mess she'd made of her life. "I should have saved them, should have gotten to them faster, should have checked the lamps, the stove, something, but I didn't. and they burned, and I lived. Cole, he held up a hand, stopping her. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. This ranch, this life, it's all I have left. I can't afford mistakes. Can't afford to trust the wrong person. There are people in town who want this land, who do anything to get their hands on my water rights. Judge Wexford and his family have been circling like vultures since the fire, making offers, starting rumors, trying to force me out. He crossed the room and stood in front of her, tall and solid and undeniably present. You lied to me, Clara. That's a fact. But you also just told me the truth when you could have kept lying. That counts for something. Hope flickered in her chest, fragile and terrifying. I'm going to give you a choice, Cole continued. You can stay here tonight, rest, let your boys sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you into town myself. Make sure you're set up somewhere safe until you can figure out your next move. No judgment, no hard feelings. Or, she barely breathed the word, or you can stay. Honest from here on out. No more lies, no more hiding. You help me run this household, I'll provide for you and your son. When that baby comes, we'll figure it out together. We'll make this a real partnership, a real family, built on truth instead of pretty stories. Clara stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. You'd still marry me, knowing everything? I'm not interested in punishing you for trying to survive, Clara. The man who abandoned you, who left you and his own child to fend for yourselves, he's the one who should be ashamed. Not you. Cole's voice was rough with conviction. I asked for honesty and companionship in my advertisement. You're giving me honesty now. The companionship, we'll have to build that. But I think we can. Tears burned in her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. She would not fall apart now, not when this impossible man was offering her more grace than she'd received in months. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Cole crouched down again, bringing himself to her level, careful not to disturb the sleeping child. Because I know what it's like to have everything fall apart, to feel like you're drowning, and no one will throw you a rope. Silas threw me one 3 years ago, kept me from drinking myself to death or putting a bullet in my brain. Maybe this is my chance to throw someone else a rope. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and when she didn't pull away, he placed his large calloused hand over hers where it rested on Benny's shoulder. The touch was warm, solid, achingly gentle. You don't have to decide right now, he said. Sleep on it. See the place in daylight. Meet Silas. Get a feel for what this life would really be like. Then tell me in the morning. Clara looked down at their hands, hers small and pale, his broad and scarred, resting together on her son's shoulder. She thought about the stagecoach disappearing into the distance, about the boarding house in town, about the long, impossible road that had led her here. She thought about lies and truth, about shame and grace, about second chances she didn't deserve but desperately needed. I don't need until morning, she said quietly. I'd like to stay, if you'll have us. Cole's expression shifted, surprise, relief, something that might have been hope. You're sure? I'm sure. She managed a tremulous smile. No more lies, Cole. I promise you that. He nodded slowly, then stood. Then welcome to Granger Creek Ranch. Let me show you where you and Benny can sleep. He led them upstairs, carrying Benny with surprising gentleness for such a large man. The boy didn't even stir, completely exhausted from the journey. The bedroom was simple but clean, with a large bed, a dresser, and windows that faced east toward the mountains in the distance. Cole laid Benny on the bed carefully, then straightened. I'll bring up your bags. There's a washroom at the end of the hall. Pitcher and basin are full. We've got a bathing room downstairs, but you'll probably want to settle in first. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for what he was offering, but they were all she had. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. Clara? Yes? That baby you're carrying. When it comes, it'll be a Granger. Same as Benny, if that's what you both want. I don't care who the father was. He gave up that right when he walked away. A child needs a father who'll be there, who'll provide and protect. I can do that. Her throat closed completely, tears spilling over despite her best efforts. Cole didn't seem to know what to do with her crying, so he simply nodded and left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Clara sank onto the edge of the bed beside her sleeping son, one hand pressed to her belly where the baby moved restlessly. Through the window, she could see the land stretching endlessly, golden and harsh and beautiful under the relentless summer sun. She had come here with lies and desperation, expecting rejection and judgment. Instead, she'd found something she hadn't dared hope for, a man willing to see past her mistakes, to offer her not just shelter, but partnership, not just survival, but the chance to build something real. It was more than she deserved, but maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what she needed. Outside, the cicadas sang their endless summer song, and the heat pressed down like a physical presence. Clara closed her eyes and let herself breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in months. She was home. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she was disoriented, uncertain of where she was. Then memory returned, the stagecoach, the confession, Cole's impossible offer. Benny was still asleep beside her, curled in a tight ball despite the warmth. She'd undressed him down to his undergarments the night before, and herself as well, both of them too exhausted for more than the most basic preparation for bed. Morning light streamed through the windows, and Clara rose carefully, moving to look out at the ranch in daylight. The view took her breath away. The house sat on a slight rise, giving a commanding view of the valley. The creek ran silver in the morning sun, lined with cottonwoods and willows. Pastures stretched to the south, where cattle grazed peacefully. To the north, she could see the mountains, still snow-capped despite the summer heat. It was beautiful, wild and harsh, but beautiful. She washed quickly in the basin Cole had filled, then dressed in her best remaining dress, a simple calico that was getting tight across the belly. She'd need to let out the seams again soon. By the time she finished, Benny was stirring. "Mama?" His voice was sleepy, confused. "Good morning, sweetheart. We're at the ranch, remember?" He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and looked around the unfamiliar room. "Is the big man going to make us leave?" Clara's heart clenched at the question, at the casual way he accepted the possibility of rejection. What had she taught her son with her desperate flight from place to place? "No, baby. We're staying. This is our home now." "Really?" Hope bloomed in his face, bright and painful to see. "Really? Now let's get you dressed and go down for breakfast." They descended the stairs together, Benny's hand tight in hers. Voices drifted from the kitchen, Cole's deep rumble and another voice, higher and rougher. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a massive wood stove, a long table, and windows that caught the morning light. Cole stood by the stove, frying eggs and bacon in a huge cast-iron skillet. Beside him, perched on a stool, was a man Clara hadn't expected. He was perhaps 50, weathered and lean, with gray threading through his brown hair and beard. But it was his right arm that drew the eye, or rather, the absence of it. His right sleeve was pinned up at the shoulder, and he worked one-handed with the ease of long practice, slicing bread with swift, sure movements. He looked up as they entered, and his face broke into a genuine smile. "Well now, you must be Mrs. Whitmore, and this young fellow is Benny, I'd wager." "Clara, please." She managed a smile in return. "And yes, this is my son Benjamin. Name's Silas Boone. I'm the ugliest ranch hand in Wyoming territory, but I make up for it with my pleasant disposition and excellent biscuits." He gestured at a pan of golden brown biscuits on the counter. "You folks like biscuits?" Benny's eyes widened. "Yes, sir." "Good man. Have a seat, both of you. Breakfast is nearly ready." They settled at the table, and within minutes, Cole was setting down plates piled with eggs, bacon, and Silas's promised biscuits. The food was simple but plentiful, and Clara realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a proper meal. "Eat up," Cole said, taking a seat across from her. "You both look half-starved." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, Benny too focused on the food to talk, Clara too aware of Cole's presence across the table. In daylight, he was even more imposing, broad-shouldered and scarred, with eyes that seemed to see everything. "So," Silas said eventually, refilling coffee cups, "Cole tells me you're staying on. That's good news. This place has needed a woman's touch for too long." Clara glanced at Cole, uncertain what he'd told his ranch hand. Cole met her gaze steadily. "I told him the truth," he said simply. We don't keep secrets here, not from each other. Silas nodded. Your husband's a damn fool for leaving you, pardon my language. But his loss is our gain, I reckon. Welcome to Granger Creek, Clara. The easy acceptance made her throat tight again. Thank you, Silas. Question is, Cole continued, what happens next? We need to establish some things, make this official. Official? Marriage, he said bluntly. If you're staying, if we're doing this, we should do it properly. There's a minister in town who comes through once a month. He'll be here next week. We can make it legal then. Claire's heart hammered. So soon? You got a reason to wait? His tone wasn't challenging, just practical. She thought about her situation. 6 months pregnant, unmarried, living in a man's house. Even out here in the territory, that would cause talk. The kind of talk that could hurt Benny, hurt the baby when it came. No, she admitted. No reason to wait. Good. Then it's settled. Silas can witness and we'll make it legal. Simple ceremony, nothing fancy. Cole. She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. Why are you doing this? Really? You could find any number of respectable women who didn't come with complications. Cole set down his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair, studying her. You want the honest answer? Always. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because this ranch needs stability, and I think you can provide that. Because that boy of yours deserves a father who'll actually be there. He paused, his dark eyes intense. And because when you told me the truth yesterday, when you could have kept lying, you reminded me that there are still people in this world who choose honesty even when it costs them something. That's worth more than a spotless reputation. Silas cleared his throat. Also because Cole's got a soft spot for strays and broken things. Found me half dead in a ditch after the war. Gave me a job when I couldn't hold a rope anymore. Nursed a wolf-bit calf through the winter once, just because it looked at him pitiful. Man's got a heart under all that gruff. Silas. Cole's tone held warning, but there was affection underneath. Just telling the truth, boss. We don't keep secrets, remember? Despite everything, Clara smiled. These two had clearly been working together for years, had developed the kind of easy companionship that came from shared hardship and mutual respect. Can I see the ranch? Benny asked suddenly, his plate clean, his eyes bright with excitement. And the horses? Do you have horses? Cole's expression softened when he looked at the boy. We do. Got a good string of working horses, plus some cattle, chickens, a couple of pigs. You want to see them? Yes, please. You should rest, Clara said automatically. We only just arrived. Let him explore, Cole interrupted gently. Silas can show him around while you and I talk about practical matters. He'll be safe with Silas, I promise. Clara looked at her son's eager face, then at Silas's kind eyes, and made herself nod. All right, but you stay with Mr. Boone, Benny. Don't wander off. I won't, Mama, I promise. Silas stood, gesturing to the door. Come on then, young man. Let's start with the chickens. They're the friendliest creatures we got. They left in a flurry of excitement, Benny's small hand trustingly placed in Silas's larger one. The kitchen felt suddenly quiet, and Clara was acutely aware of being alone with Cole. He refilled her coffee, then his own, and settled back into his chair. We need to talk about how this is going to work. All right. This house has 4 bedrooms upstairs, the one you and Benny slept in last night. That'll be yours and his for now. When the baby comes, we can move Benny to another room if needed, or set up a cradle in your room. Whatever works best. And you? I'll stay in my room at the end of the hall. We'll share the common spaces, kitchen, parlor, dining room, but we both get our own private space. Clara understood what he was offering, a marriage in name and practical partnership, but not necessarily in bed. Relief and something else, disappointment perhaps, flickered through her. That seems fair. If you want more, Cole said carefully, his ears slightly red. If you want an actual marriage bed eventually, that's something we can discuss. But there's no pressure, Clara. I'm not taking you as a wife to use you. I'm taking you as a partner to build something with. The bluntness was oddly comforting. I appreciate that. For now, we focus on getting you settled, getting the household running smoothly, preparing for the baby. Silas and I have been managing, but it's rough living. We need better cooking, better organization, someone to handle the domestic side so we can focus on the ranch work. I can do that. I'm a good cook and I know how to manage a household. My mother made sure of that, even if she... Clara stopped herself. Even if she kicked you out when you needed her most? Cole's tone was hard. She did what she thought was right. She did what was easy. There's a difference. He stood and began clearing the breakfast dishes, moving with the practiced efficiency of a man long accustomed to doing for himself. You don't have to defend people who failed you, Clara. She rose to help him, and they worked side by side at the large basin, washing and drying in comfortable silence. Through the window, she could see Silas and Benny at the chicken coop, the boy laughing at something the old ranch hand was telling him. He's good with children, she observed. Silas, he's good with everyone. Good. Taught me most of what I know about ranching, about being a decent human being. Lost his arm at Shiloh, spent years drifting after the war. When I found him, he was ready to die. Gave him a reason to live, and he returned the favor after. Cole trailed off, his jaw tight. After the fire? Yeah. He set down the dish he'd been washing, his hands gripping the edge of the basin. I need to tell you about that, about what really happened. Clara waited, sensing he needed to do this in his own time. There are folks in town, Judge Harlan Wexford and his family, who've wanted this ranch since before I inherited it from my father. The creek that runs through my land, it feeds most of the valley, controls water, you control everything out here. My father refused to sell, and so do I. And they're not happy about it. That's putting it mildly. Wexford's made offers, threats, tried legal maneuvers. 3 years ago, my house caught fire in the middle of the night. By the time I woke up, it was too late. I got out through a window, my wife Catherine and our daughter Emma. His voice broke. They were in the back bedroom. I tried to get to them, but the smoke, the flames, I couldn't reach them in time. Clara's hand found his arm, squeezing gently. I'm so sorry, Cole. The fire inspector said it was an accident, probably a lamp knocked over, he said. But I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. There were too many coincidences, the way it started so fast, the way it spread, the fact that Wexford made another offer to buy the ranch 2 days after the funeral. You think he had something to do with it? I can't prove it. But yeah, I think his son Lance or one of his hired men set that fire. And I think they meant for all of us to die, to make it look like an accident so Wexford could swoop in and buy the land from my grieving relatives for a fraction of what it's worth. The horror of it settled over Clara like a shroud. That's murder. It is. And if I could prove it, I'd see them hang. But I can't. So instead I watch my back, keep my guard up, and make damn sure they don't get another chance. Clara understood now why he'd been so careful, so suspicious when she arrived, why he'd needed her to be honest. In his world, deception could mean death. I won't lie to you again, she said firmly, about anything. You have my word. Cole turned to face her fully, his dark eyes searching hers. I believe you, and I need you to believe me when I say I'll protect you and your children. All 3 of them. Anyone who comes for this ranch, for this family, they'll have to go through me first. The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent a shiver through her. This was a man who'd lost everything once and refused to lose anything else. A man who'd turned his grief into iron determination. I believe you, she whispered. They finished the dishes in silence, but it was a different quality of silence now, charged with shared understanding, with the beginning of trust being carefully built between 2 people who'd both been broken by life and were trying, tentatively, to build something new from the pieces. When Benny and Silas returned an hour later, the boy was flushed with excitement and full of stories about the chickens and the horses, and the calf he'd been allowed to pet. Clara listened with a smile, watching her son bloom under the attention of these 2 kind men, and felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe this could work. Maybe, against all odds, she'd found a place where the truth was valued more than appearance, where broken things could be mended, where a woman who'd made mistakes could still find grace. The sun climbed higher, the heat building, and Clara stood on the porch of Granger Creek Ranch, watching her son laugh as Silas taught him how to scatter feed for the chickens. She was 6 months pregnant, abandoned by her husband, and had nowhere else to go. But for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid. She was home. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of activity that left Clara exhausted but strangely content. She woke each morning to the sound of Cole and Silas moving about downstairs, their voices low as they discussed the day's work over coffee. By the time she made it to the kitchen, they'd usually already eaten and headed out to the pastures, leaving fresh biscuits warming on the stove and a pot of coffee waiting for her. The heat was relentless. Even in the early morning hours, the air shimmered with it, and by midday the sun turned the ranch into a furnace. Clara learned quickly to do her heaviest work before noon, washing, cooking, organizing the cluttered pantry that clearly hadn't seen a woman's attention in years. She'd rest during this worst heat, sitting in the shade of the porch with Benny, mending clothes or reading to him from one of the few books she'd managed to keep. Silas was a constant, comfortable presence. He'd drift in and out throughout the day, checking on them with the casual ease of someone who understood what it meant to need looking after without wanting to feel helpless. He taught Benny how to collect eggs without spooking the hens, how to identify the different horses by their markings, how to read the sky for signs of weather changing. "Storm coming," he'd say, squinting at the horizon where thunderheads were building in the distance. "Can smell it on the wind. We'll need to secure the barn before it hits." And he was always right. The storms would roll in during the late afternoon, bringing brief, violent downpours that turned the dust to mud and left the air smelling of wet sage and earth. Clara would stand at the window watching lightning crack across the sky, feeling the baby move restlessly in her belly, and try not to think about fire spreading through dry timber. Cole was different. He kept his distance during the day, working long hours on the ranch, but in the evenings he'd return to the house and make an effort to be present. They'd eat dinner together at the long table, Clara's cooking improving as she learned the quirks of the massive wood stove, and afterward Cole would sit with Benny, teaching him simple card games or telling him stories about the ranch, about the cattle drives and the wildlife that roamed the territory. "See those mountains?" Cole said one evening, pointing through the window to the peaks visible in the distance. "Come winter, they'll be covered in snow so deep you can't see the trails. Bears den up there, and mountain lions hunt the ridgelines. But in summer there's meadows full of wildflowers, streams so clear you can count every pebble at the bottom." Benny's eyes were wide. "Have you been up there?" "Many times. My father used to take me hunting when I was about your age. Taught me to track, to read signs, to respect the land." Something shifted in Cole's expression. "Someday when you're older, I'll take you up there. Show you the places he showed me." The casual promise made Clara's throat tight. Cole was offering her son more than shelter. He was offering him belonging, legacy, the kind of steady male presence Benny had never known. "I'd like that, sir," Benny said quietly. "You can call me Cole, son. No need for all the sir business around here." "Yes, Cole," Benny grinned, testing out the name. Later, after Benny was asleep, Clara found Cole on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette and staring out at the darkening land. She hesitated, then stepped out to join him. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said quietly. He glanced at her, the tip of his cigarette glowing red in the dusk. "Do what?" "Be so kind to him, to us. You're already giving us everything, shelter, food, your name. You don't have to pretend to care about a boy who isn't yours." Cole was silent for a long moment, smoke curling from his lips. Then he stubbed out the cigarette against the porch rail and turned to face her fully. "I'm not pretending anything, Clara. That boy is 5 years old, and he's already learned to be afraid of being sent away, of not being good enough, of losing the only parent he has left. You think I don't see that? You think I don't recognize it?" "Cole, my daughter Emma was 3 when she died. She used to follow me everywhere, chattering about everything and nothing, asking 1,000 questions. Benny reminds me of her sometimes, that same hungry curiosity, that same need to understand the world." His voice roughened. "I can't get my daughter back, but I can make damn sure your son knows what it feels like to have a father who actually wants him around." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me for doing what any decent man should do." He reached out and squeezed her shoulder briefly, his hand warm and solid. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we go into town for supplies, and I need you sharp. The folks there can be, difficult." The warning in his tone made her uneasy, but she nodded. "I'll be ready." The next morning they set out early to beat the worst of the heat. Cole drove the wagon with Clara beside him on the bench seat, while Benny sat in the back, thrilled by the adventure. Silas stayed behind to manage the ranch, though Clara noticed he checked Cole's rifle twice before they left and made Cole promise to be careful. "Wexford's men have been hanging around town more than usual," Silas muttered. "Just keep your eyes open." The ride into town took nearly 2 hours, following a rutted road that wound through golden grassland and past several smaller ranches. Cole pointed out landmarks as they went, a distinctive rock formation, the boundary markers that separated his land from neighboring properties, the turnoff that led to the Wexford estate. "They've got the biggest spread in the county after mine," Cole explained. "Judge Wexford came out here 30 years ago with money from back east, bought up land when it was cheap. His wife Vivian comes from old Southern money, thinks she's royalty because her family had a plantation before the war." "And their son Lance?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Spoiled, mean, and dangerous. Thinks he's entitled to whatever he wants because his father has power. Stay away from him, Clara. If you see him in town, you walk the other direction." The vehemence in his voice made her nervous, but she filed the warning away carefully. The town of Granger's Bend was larger than Clara had expected. A proper main street with a general store, a bank, a hotel, a saloon, and several other establishments. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their business in the morning heat. A few heads turned as Cole drove the wagon down the street, and Clara felt the weight of curious stares. Cole helped her down from the wagon with careful courtesy, then lifted Benny down. "We'll start at the general store, get the supplies we need. Then I have business at the bank." The general store was dim and blessedly cool, with shelves packed full of everything from cloth and thread to tools and tinned goods. An older woman stood behind the counter, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Clara's appearance. The swell of her belly, her worn dress, the way she stood close to Cole. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," Cole said evenly. "Need to stock up on supplies." "Mr. Granger." The woman's tone was polite but cool. "I heard you had a visitor at the ranch." "Not a visitor, my fiancée. Clara Whitmore, this is Mrs. Patterson. She runs the store with her husband." Clara managed a smile. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." Mrs. Patterson's gaze dropped pointedly to Clara's belly, then back to her face. "How nice. When's the wedding?" "This Sunday, when Pastor Mills comes through." Cole's tone dared her to comment further. "I see. Well, congratulations, I'm sure." The words were proper, but the judgment underneath was unmistakable. They spent the next hour gathering supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, fabric for new curtains Clara had planned, a slate and chalk for Benny, various household necessities. Cole added a bolt of soft blue cotton to the pile without asking, meeting Clara's questioning look with a slight smile. "For a new dress, can't get married in travel clothes." The thoughtfulness of it made her chest ache. "Thank you." They were loading the supplies into the wagon when a voice called out across the street. "Well, well, Cole Granger, as I live and breathe, and with a lady friend, no less." Clara turned to see a man approaching, tall, well-dressed in a suit that must have been unbearably hot, with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was perhaps 30, handsome in a polished way that reminded Clara unpleasantly of Samuel. Cole's entire body went rigid. "Lance." So this was Lance Wexford. Clara instinctively moved closer to Benny, placing herself between her son and this man. Lance's gaze swept over her with obvious assessment, lingering on her belly in a way that made her skin crawl. "Heard rumors you'd taken up with a woman. Didn't believe them, honestly. Thought you'd sworn off the fairer sex after your tragic loss." "What do you want, Lance?" Cole's voice was flat, dangerous. "Just being neighborly. Wanted to meet the new Mrs. Granger." He tipped his hat to Clara with exaggerated courtesy. "Lance Wexford, ma'am. My family owns the largest ranch in the county. Perhaps you've heard of us?" "No," Clara said simply. His smile faltered slightly. "Well, you will. Everyone in these parts knows the Wexford name. We're very influential." He turned back to Cole. "My father was just saying last week how unfortunate it is that you insist on struggling along on that ranch when we'd be happy to take it off your hands. Give you a fair price, let you start fresh somewhere else. Might be easier, especially with a new family to think about." Tell your father the same thing I've told him every other time. The ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Shame. That's a lot of land for one man to manage, especially with water rights becoming such a contentious issue. Things happen, you know, accidents, fires. Lance's tone was casual, but his eyes were hard. Would be terrible if something happened to your new bride and her boy. This territory can be dangerous for those who aren't careful. Cole moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing by the wagon, the next he had Lance pressed against the storefront wall, forearm across his throat. You threatening my family? Cole's voice was a growl. Lance smiled despite the pressure on his windpipe. Just stating facts, Granger. No need to get violent. Though I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. You always were a brute. Cole? Clara's voice cut through the tension. Let him go. He's not worth it. For a long moment, Cole didn't move. Then he stepped back, releasing Lance with a shove that sent the younger man stumbling. Lance straightened his jacket, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. You'll regret that, Granger. Your father can go to hell, and you can join him. Cole grabbed Clara's arm gently, steering her toward the wagon. We're done here. They climbed onto the wagon bench, and Cole snapped the reins, sending the horses into a quick trot. Clara looked back once to see Lance watching them, his expression twisted with rage. That was foolish, she said quietly once they'd left town behind. I know. He'll make trouble now. He was going to make trouble anyway. Cole's hands were tight on the reins, his jaw clenched. But he threatened you and Benny. I won't tolerate that. Cole. She waited until he looked at her. I appreciate you defending us, but I need you to be smart about it. If you end up in jail or worse because of me, won't happen. Wexford's got the judge in his pocket, but he doesn't control everything, and I'm careful. They rode in silence for a while, the heat oppressive, the only sound the creaking of the wagon and the steady clip of hooves. Benny had fallen asleep in the back, exhausted by the excitement. Tell me about the water rights, Clara said finally. Why are they so important? Cole sighed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. This territory is dry, Clara. Most of the year rain is scarce. Creeks and springs are everything out here. They determine where you can graze cattle, where you can build, whether you survive or fail. Granger Creek runs through my land and feeds into the valley. Folks downstream depend on that water for their stock, their gardens, everything. And you control it? I have senior water rights, which means I get first claim. I can dam it, divert it, use it however I want legally. But I don't. I let it flow freely because I believe that's right, that everyone downstream deserves access. The Wexfords want to buy my land so they can control that water, charge people for access, squeeze them until they have no choice but to sell their own properties. That's monstrous. That's business, according to Judge Wexford. He sees the whole valley as something to be owned and exploited. I see it as something to be shared and protected. Cole glanced at her. That's why they won't stop coming after me. As long as I hold that land, their plans can't move forward. Clara absorbed this, understanding now the stakes involved. This wasn't just about a ranch or personal vendetta. This was about power, about the future of an entire community. Is that why you think they started the fire, to get you off the land? Cole's face went hard. It's the only explanation that makes sense. The fire started fast, spread faster than any natural fire should have. And Wexford made his offer exactly 2 days after the funeral, before my wife and daughter were even properly buried. But you couldn't prove it. No evidence. Fire destroyed everything. And the fire inspector was a friend of Wexford's, of course. Ruled it accidental, case closed. His voice was bitter. I tried to investigate on my own, but I'm not a detective. All I have is suspicion and rage, and neither one of those will hold up in court. They were approaching the ranch now, the familiar buildings coming into view. Clara could see Silas working near the barn, and he straightened when he spotted the wagon, relief visible even from a distance. Clara, Cole's voice made her turn. I need you to understand something. By marrying me, by taking the Granger name, you're putting yourself and your children in the middle of this. The Wexfords won't just leave you alone because you're a woman. They'll see you as a target, a weakness they can exploit. I understand. Do you? Because if anything happened to you or Benny or the baby because of me, his voice broke. Clara reached over and placed her hand on his arm. Cole, I came here with nothing. No money, no prospects, no hope. You gave me all of that back. If there's danger that comes with it, I'll face it. We'll face it together." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his dark eyes. "You're braver than you know." "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but I'm tired of running. This is my home now, our home, and I'll fight for it if I have to." A slow smile spread across Cole's face, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his features, making him look younger, less burdened. "Then we'll fight together." Silas met them at the wagon, his weathered face concerned. "Any trouble in town?" "Ran into Lance Wexford," Cole said, climbing down. "He made threats. I may have roughed him up a bit." Silas whistled low. "Well, that'll bring consequences. Judge will probably send the sheriff out to have words with you." "Let him come. I'm not scared of Hank Morrison. Man's a coward who does whatever Wexford tells him." They unloaded the wagon together, carrying supplies into the house while Benny woke and stumbled sleepily after them. Clara began putting things away, organizing the pantry while the men discussed ranch business in low voices. "I want you armed from now on," she heard Cole say. "Rifle in the barn, pistol on you at all times. If anyone comes onto this property who isn't welcome, you shoot first and ask questions later." "You really think they'll try something?" "I think Lance is spoiled and vindictive, and I just embarrassed him in front of half the town. Yes, I think he'll try something." The conversation made Clara's hands shake as she arranged flour and sugar on the shelves. She'd known there was danger, but hearing Cole discuss it so matter-of-factly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Cole excused himself to walk the property line. It was something he did most nights, Silas explained, checking for signs of trespass, making sure the fences were secure, looking for anything out of place. "He's been doing it since the fire," Silas said, helping Clara with the dishes while Benny played with his toy soldiers at the table. "Can't sleep sometimes unless he's checked everything twice. I tried to tell him he'll wear himself out, but the man's stubborn as a Missouri mule." "He blames himself," Clara said quietly, "for not saving them." "Course he does. Survivor's guilt is a heavy burden. I know something about that myself." Silas rolled up his empty sleeve absently. "Lost my arm and watched 3 good friends die at Shiloh. Spent years asking myself why I got to live when they didn't, why I was the one who made it out." "How did you get past it?" "Not sure I have entirely, but Cole gave me a purpose, a reason to keep going. Maybe you can do the same for him. Give him something to build toward instead of just surviving day to day." Clara nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. Cole had been living in the shadow of his loss for 3 years, defined by grief and the quest for vengeance he couldn't achieve. Maybe what he needed was to look forward instead of backward, to build a new family instead of mourning the one he'd lost. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. Cole was on edge, constantly watching, checking windows, making sure doors were locked at night. Silas worked with a rifle slung across his back, and Clara found herself jumping at every unexpected sound. But nothing happened. No sheriff came to arrest Cole. No mysterious fires broke out. The ranch continued its daily rhythm, cattle to tend, fences to mend, endless work under the relentless sun. Sunday arrived with a cloudless sky and heat that shimmered off the dirt road. Pastor Mills arrived mid-morning in a dusty buggy, a cheerful man in his 50s with a round belly and kind eyes. He greeted Clara warmly, blessed Benny's head, and seemed genuinely happy to be officiating the marriage. "It's good to see you taking another chance on happiness, Cole," he said, pumping Cole's hand vigorously. "The Lord knows you've suffered enough." Clara had asked Cole specifically for a ceremony without religious references, and he'd agreed without question, simply telling the pastor they wanted to keep things simple. Pastor Mills, to his credit, seemed to understand without needing explanation. They gathered in the parlor, Clara in the new blue dress she'd sewn from the fabric Cole bought, Cole in his best shirt and clean trousers, Benny standing as witness alongside Silas. The windows were open to catch any breath of breeze, and the cicadas sang their endless summer song. The ceremony was brief and simple. Pastor Mills spoke about partnership and commitment, about choosing to build a life together through hardship and joy. Clara repeated her vows with a steady voice, promising to honor and stand beside Cole Granger for as long as they both lived. Cole's voice was deeper, rougher with emotion as he made the same promises to her. When Pastor Mills pronounced them married, Cole bent and kissed her cheek, a gentle, respectful gesture that somehow felt more intimate than anything else. Benny cheered and Silas grinned wide, and just like that, Clara Whitmore became Clara Granger. They celebrated with a lunch Clara had prepared: fried chicken, biscuits, fresh vegetables from the garden she'd been tending, and an apple pie that was Silas's contribution. Pastor Mills regaled them with stories from his circuit, the different towns and people he served, and for a few hours the ranch felt like a place of genuine joy instead of constant vigilance. After the pastor left, promising to return in a month, the newlyweds stood on the porch, watching dust settle on the road. "Well, Mrs. Granger," Cole said quietly, "how does it feel to be officially part of this family?" Claire considered the question seriously. "Terrifying. Hopeful." "Right." She looked up at him. "Thank you for giving us your name, for protecting us. Thank you for trusting me with your truth." He reached out and took her hand, his large palm warm against hers. "We'll figure this out together, Clara. One day at a time." That night, lying in her bed with Benny curled beside her, Clara pressed her hand to her belly and felt the baby move. In a few months, she'd bring a new life into this world, a Granger, as Cole had promised, a child who would grow up knowing the safety and belonging she and Benny had found here. But her contentment was shattered 3 days later when Silas came running to the house in the middle of the afternoon, his face gray with shock. "Clara, where's Cole?" She emerged from the kitchen, alarmed by his tone. "Out checking the north fence line. What's wrong?" "Riders coming, at least 6 of them, moving fast. And Clara?" His voice dropped. "I saw Judge Wexford's carriage in front." Her blood ran cold. "They're coming here?" "Looks like it. I need to find Cole. Warn him. You get Benny, lock yourselves in the house, and don't open the door for anyone except me or Cole. You understand?" She nodded mutely, fear closing her throat. Silas grabbed his rifle and took off at a run toward the northern pasture. Clara rushed upstairs, finding Benny playing with his soldiers in their room. "Sweetheart, we need to go downstairs right now. Quick, quiet, just like we practiced." They'd done this before, in Kansas City. The sudden urgent flight when debt collectors came calling, when Samuel's mistress's husband showed up looking for revenge. Benny knew the drill. He gathered his soldiers without question and followed her downstairs. Clara positioned them in the pantry, a small, windowless room where they couldn't be seen from outside. She left the door cracked so she could hear and pressed Benny against the wall behind the flour sacks. "Stay here. Don't make a sound. If anyone comes except Cole or Silas, you hide behind these sacks and don't come out. Promise me." "I promise, Mama." His eyes were huge, frightened. She kissed his forehead and took up position where she could see through the crack in the door into the kitchen. Minutes crawled by. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her ears. Then the sound of horses, multiple sets of hooves thundering into the yard. Men's voices, rough and loud. A heavy fist pounding on the front door. "Granger, open up! We know you're in there!" Clara held her breath. The pounding continued, more insistent. "This is Sheriff Morrison. Open this door, Granger, or we'll break it down." Where was Cole? Had Silas found him? Clara's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. The pounding stopped. Voices conferring outside, too low to make out words. Then the sound of boots on the porch, circling the house. "Check the barn," someone ordered. "If he's not in the house, he's out there somewhere." More footsteps, men spreading out across the property. Clara prayed silently that Cole would stay away, that he wouldn't come charging in and get himself arrested, or worse. Then a new voice, cultured and cold. "Mrs. Granger, I know you're in there. This is Judge Harlan Wexford. I have no quarrel with you, dear lady. I simply need to speak with your husband about a legal matter." Clara didn't move, didn't breathe. "Your husband assaulted my son in town 3 days ago. Multiple witnesses saw the attack. I'm here to ensure justice is served. Now, I'm a reasonable man. If you tell us where Cole is, this can all be resolved peacefully." Still, she remained silent. Benny pressed against her leg, trembling. A long pause. Then Wexford's voice again, harder now. "Very well. Sheriff, search the premises. I want him found." The sound of boots on the porch, the front door rattling as someone tested it. Clara had locked it as Silas instructed, but how long would that hold them? "It's locked, Judge." "Then break it down." A tremendous crash as someone hit the door with force. The wood held, but barely. Another crash, and Clara heard timber cracking. Suddenly, a new voice rang out across the yard. Cole's voice, strong and furious. "You touch that door, Morrison, and I'll put a bullet in you. I don't care if you're wearing a badge." The crashing stopped. Clara risked a glance through the kitchen window and saw Cole standing near the barn, rifle raised and pointed at the cluster of men by the house. Silas was beside him, also armed. Judge Wexford stepped into view, a tall man in an expensive suit, silver-haired and distinguished-looking, with the kind of face that probably smiled easily in polite society, but now wore an expression of cold calculation. "Mr. Granger, how good of you to join us. I'm here on official business. You assaulted my son." "Your son threatened my wife and her child. I defended my family. That's not assault, that's self-defense." "Multiple witnesses say differently. You put your hands on Lance without provocation." "Your son's a liar, and so is anyone who claims otherwise." Cole's voice was steady, but Clara could hear the rage underneath. "Now get off my property, all of you." Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, hand on his pistol. He was a stocky man with a weak chin and nervous eyes. "Can't do that, Cole. I got a warrant for your arrest. You need to come with us peaceful-like." "Show me the warrant." Morrison fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Cole approached slowly, rifle still raised, and snatched it away. He read it quickly, his jaw clenching. "This is dated yesterday. You had this drawn up before you even talked to me." "The complaint was filed immediately after the incident," Wexford said smoothly. "Due process, Mr. Granger. Surely you understand." "What I understand is that you're using your pet sheriff to harass me because you want my land. This has nothing to do with Lance and everything to do with water rights." Such paranoia. Wexford's smile was cold. "Though I suppose grief can make a man see conspiracies everywhere. Tell me, do you still blame me for that unfortunate fire 3 years ago? Still clinging to that delusion?" Cole's finger tightened on the trigger, and for a terrifying moment Clara thought he would actually shoot. Silas placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. "Don't," Silas said quietly. "That's what he wants. An excuse to have you killed." Cole lowered the rifle fractionally, breathing hard. "You've got nothing on me, Wexford. This warrant is garbage, and you know it." "Perhaps, but you'll still need to come to town, appear before me in court, post bail. These things take time. Days, perhaps weeks. And in the meantime, who's going to protect your new bride and her bastard son?" The insult hung in the air like poison. Clara felt rage flood through her, drowning the fear. She unlocked the pantry door and stepped into the kitchen, ignoring Benny's frightened protest. Before she could second-guess herself, she walked to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped out onto the porch. Every man in the yard turned to stare at her. 6 hired guns, the sheriff, and Judge Wexford himself. Clara raised her chin and walked down the steps, moving to stand beside Cole. "My son is not a bastard," she said clearly. "He's a Granger, same as the child I'm carrying. And if you have something to say about my family, Judge Wexford, you can say it to my face." Wexford's expression flickered, surprised perhaps that she'd dare confront him. "Mrs. Granger, how spirited. Though I wonder if you understand the precarious position you're in. A woman of questionable virtue, married to a violent man with enemies. This territory can be very dangerous for those without proper protection." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating facts. Your husband has made powerful enemies. It would be unfortunate if something happened to him while he was awaiting trial, leaving you alone and vulnerable with 2 small children." Cole moved then, stepping between Clara and Wexford. "You go near her, you go near my children, and I'll kill you. Badge or no badge, sheriff present or not, I will end you." The naked violence in his voice made several of the hired guns shift nervously. Even Wexford took a step back. "Such threats," Wexford said, though his voice wasn't quite as steady. "Perhaps I should add threatening a judge to the charges." "Do it," Cole snarled. "Add whatever you want. But you're leaving my property now, and you're not coming back without an army. Because the next person who steps foot on Granger Creek Ranch with the intent to harm my family won't leave alive. The standoff stretched for an endless moment. Then Wexford smiled, a cold, calculated expression. Very well, Mr. Granger. We'll do this the legal way. You have 7 days to appear before my court to answer the charges. If you don't show, I'll issue a warrant for your arrest on contempt charges, and then Sheriff Morrison will have every right to storm this ranch and drag you out by force. 7 days. Don't make me wait. He turned and climbed into his carriage. The sheriff and the hired guns mounted their horses, and within minutes the whole group was thundering back down the road, leaving only dust in their wake. Cole stood rigid, rifle still in his hands, watching until they were completely out of sight. Then he turned to Clara, his face twisted with rage and something that looked like fear. What the hell were you thinking coming out here? I was thinking he doesn't get to insult my son. I was thinking you needed someone to stand with you. I needed you safe inside with Benny. I'm not a child, Cole. I'm your wife, and I won't hide while men threaten our family. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, and Clara saw the moment his anger cracked and something else showed through. Pride, maybe, or gratitude, or fear of losing another person he'd started to care about. You're going to give me gray hair, he said finally. Then we'll match. She gestured at her own hair, already showing threads of silver despite her relative youth. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Then he pulled her against him in a brief, fierce embrace that left her breathless. Don't ever scare me like that again. Don't make promises you can't keep, Mr. Granger. Silas cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt, but we need to talk strategy. 7 days isn't much time. They moved inside, gathering at the kitchen table while Benny watched from the doorway, still pale with fear. Clara pulled him onto her lap, needing the contact as much as he did. Wexford's not going to let this drop, Silas said. He'll use those 7 days to stack the deck, gather false witnesses, pressure folks into testifying against you, whatever it takes. I know. Cole's voice was grim. If you go into that courtroom, you're walking into a trap. Wexford controls the trial, the witnesses, everything. Best case, you pay a hefty fine and spend a few weeks in jail. Worst case. Silas trailed off, but they all knew what the worst case looked like. So what do we do? Clara asked. We fight, Cole said flatly. We find evidence of Wexford's corruption, his crimes. We turn this around on him. How? We've been trying for 3 years to prove he was behind the fire. We've got nothing. Then we find something else. Embezzlement, fraud, abuse of power, anything. The man's dirty. We just need to prove it. Cole looked at Clara. Can you write? Good penmanship, legal documents, that sort of thing? Yes, of course. Then we start documenting everything. Every threat, every illegal action, every witness we can find who'll testify against him. We build a case. In 7 days? Silas's skepticism was evident. We do what we can, and if it comes to it, Cole's hand moved to his rifle. I'll defend this ranch and this family by whatever means necessary. Clara felt the baby kick hard against her ribs, as if in protest. 7 days to find evidence, to build a defense, to somehow beat a powerful judge at his own game. It was impossible. But looking at Cole's determined face, at Silas's loyal support, feeling Benny's small body against hers, and the child growing inside her, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope, exactly, but determination. They would fight, and maybe, just maybe, they would survive. The next morning broke with an oppressive stillness that made Clara's skin prickle with unease. No breeze stirred the curtains. No birds sang their usual dawn chorus. The air itself felt weighted, pregnant with the kind of tension that came before violent storms. Cole had been up most of the night, pacing the house, checking locks and windows. Clara had heard his footsteps on the stairs, the creak of floorboards, the soft click of his rifle being checked and rechecked. When she finally came down to the kitchen just after sunrise, she found him at the table surrounded by papers, old ledgers, property deeds, letters yellowed with age. Did you sleep at all? She asked quietly, not wanting to wake Benny upstairs. An hour, maybe 2? He looked up, and she saw the exhaustion carved into his face, the shadows under his eyes. Found my father's old records. Thought maybe there'd be something useful in them. Clara poured coffee for both of them and sat down across from him. And? Nothing concrete. But there's a pattern here. Offers to buy the ranch dating back 15 years, always from Wexford, always refused. And every time my father said no, something bad happened. Fence cut, cattle rustled, barn fire. He tapped one letter. This one's from 1867. My father writes about mysterious riders on the property, threats made in town. Sound familiar? So Wexford's been trying to force your family off this land for years, decades. And he's patient, willing to wait, to chip away bit by bit until there's nothing left. Cole's jaw tightened. But he got impatient with me. The fire was supposed to end it, kill me and my family, make the ranch available for purchase from grieving relatives who'd want nothing to do with this cursed place. Except you survived. Except I survived. And now he's stuck. Can't kill me outright without raising suspicions. Can't force me to sell. Can't get the water rights he needs for his schemes. Cole stood and moved to the window, staring out at the land that had cost his family so much blood and grief. So he's trying a new approach. Legal harassment, social pressure, wearing me down until I make a mistake. Clara joined him at the window, placing her hand on his arm. Then we don't make mistakes. We stay smart, stay careful, and we find a way to beat him. Before Cole could respond, Silas burst through the door, his face flushed with exertion. We got problems, big ones. What now? Cole's hand went instinctively to his pistol. Riders hit the Jensen place last night, burned their hay barn, shot 2 horses, left a message painted on the side of their house. Silas paused, catching his breath. It said, Granger's friends suffer for his sins. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. The Jensens were their nearest neighbors, good people who'd welcomed her warmly when Cole had introduced them after the wedding. Anyone hurt? Cole's voice was deadly calm. No, thank heavens. But Mary Jensen is terrified, and Tom's talking about leaving the territory entirely, says he can't risk his family for a feud that's not his fight. Cole's fist slammed into the window frame hard enough to rattle the glass. God damn him, this is my fight. Jensen's got nothing to do with it. Wexford's sending a message, Clara said quietly. Anyone who stands with you becomes a target. He's trying to isolate us. Make sure no one will help when he makes his final move. It's working. Silas sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 50-plus years. Tom's not the only one spooked. I rode through town on my way back. Folks are scared. Shop owners locking their doors early, families keeping their children close. Word spreading that there's going to be violence, and nobody wants to be caught in the middle. Cole turned from the window, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Then we need to move faster. 7 days was already impossible. Now we've got less than that before Wexford makes another move. He looked at Clara. You still willing to help? Of course. Then here's what we're going to do. Silas, I need you to ride to the Miller Ranch, then the Caldwells, then anyone else you can reach. Tell them what's happening, ask if they've had similar trouble with Wexford over the years. Get statements, dates, anything concrete we can use. Cole, they're all terrified. You think they'll talk? Some will. Find the ones who've been hurt bad enough to want revenge more than they want safety. Cole turned to Clara. You're going to town. What? After yesterday, you want me to... I need you to talk to the women. Wives, daughters, shopkeepers. Men might be scared, but women talk to each other. They know things, see things their husbands don't notice. And more importantly, Wexford won't see you as a threat. You're just a pregnant woman, harmless. Clara bridled at the description, but she understood his logic. What am I looking for? Anything. Complaints about Wexford or his son, stories about people being cheated or threatened, gossip about the fire 3 years ago. Everything gets written down, dated, signed if possible. He pulled out a leather satchel and began filling it with paper and pencils. Start with Mrs. Patterson at the general store. She's cold, but she's also the biggest gossip in 3 counties. If anyone knows the dirty secrets, it's her. And you? Clara asked. What will you be doing? Cole's expression went hard. I'm going to pay a visit to someone who might actually have evidence, someone who was there the night of the fire and might be willing to talk if I ask the right way. Who? Better you don't know. That way, if Wexford questions you, you can honestly say you have no idea where I went. He cupped her face gently, his calloused thumb brushing her cheek. Be careful in town. Don't go anywhere alone, don't let anyone corner you, and if you see Lance Wexford, you get away from him immediately. Understood? I'm not a child, Cole. No, you're my wife, and you're carrying my child. That makes you precious beyond measure and a target for any man who wants to hurt me. His dark eyes bored into hers. Promise me you'll be careful. The raw emotion in his voice made her throat tight. I promise. They prepared quickly, Silas saddling horses, Cole loading his pistol and rifle with methodical precision, Clara changing into her most respectable dress and pinning up her hair. Benny watched it all with wide, frightened eyes from his spot at the kitchen table. Why is everyone leaving? He asked as Clara knelt to hug him goodbye. We have work to do, sweetheart, important work that will keep our family safe. Can't I come with you? Not this time. You're going to stay here and guard the ranch. Think you can do that? Benny straightened, trying to look brave. Yes, Mama. Good boy. Don't open the door for anyone except me, Cole, or Silas. If strangers come, you hide in the pantry like we practiced. Can you remember that? I remember. Cole crouched down beside her, meeting Benny's eyes. You're the man of the house while we're gone, son. That's a big responsibility. Your mama's counting on you. I won't let you down, Cole. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Pride, affection, the tentative beginning of the bond between father and son. I know you won't. They left together, splitting up at the main road. Silas heading east toward the neighboring ranches, Cole north toward the mountains, Clara south toward town. She sat alone in the wagon, the morning sun already fierce despite the early hour, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The ride into Granger's Bend took nearly 2 hours, and by the time Clara arrived, the heat was punishing. She tied the wagon in front of the general store and took a moment to compose herself, pressing a hand to her belly where the baby was moving restlessly. 7 months along now, and the weight of it made every movement awkward, every breath a little harder. The bell above the door chimed as she entered the dim, cool interior. Mrs. Patterson looked up from behind the counter, her expression shifting from bland politeness to something harder when she recognized Clara. Mrs. Granger, didn't expect to see you back so soon. I need to make a few purchases. Clara approached the counter with as much dignity as she could muster. And I was hoping you might spare a few minutes to talk. Talk about what? About the Wexfords. About what's really happening in this town. Mrs. Patterson's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Clara kept her voice low, conversational. I think you know exactly what kind of man Judge Wexford is, what kind of things his family has done over the years, and I think you're tired of staying quiet about it. The older woman's hand stilled on the bolt of fabric she'd been rearranging. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she moved to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and pulled down the shade. You've got 10 minutes, she said quietly. And if anyone asks, we never had this conversation. Clara pulled out her paper and pencil. Tell me everything. What emerged over the next half hour was a portrait of systematic corruption and cruelty that made Clara's blood run cold. Mrs. Patterson spoke in a flat, emotionless voice about the businesses Wexford had destroyed through legal manipulation, the families forced to sell their land for a fraction of its value, the mysterious accidents that befell anyone who stood against him. The fire at the Granger place 3 years ago. Everyone knows it wasn't an accident, Mrs. Patterson said. But nobody will say it out loud because we're all terrified. Judge Wexford controls the law in this county. He controls the sheriff, the land office, the bank. Cross him, and you lose everything. What about his wife? Vivian Wexford. Mrs. Patterson's expression flickered with something that might have been pity. She's a complicated woman. Came from old Southern money. Married Wexford when she was barely 18. I think she believed she was getting a gentleman, a man of honor. She shook her head. What she got was a tyrant. He controls every aspect of her life, where she goes, who she sees, is how she spends money. I've seen bruises on her arms more than once. Clara's pencil paused. He hits her. I can't prove it, but yes, I believe so. And their son Lance takes after his father. Cruel, entitled, violent when he doesn't get his way. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. His wife Nora is even worse off than Vivian. Married Lance 2 years ago, poor thing. She comes into the store sometimes with marks on her face, moving like everything hurts. Says she's clumsy, always falling or walking into doors. No one helps her? How? Her husband is the judge's son. The law won't touch him. And where would she go even if she left? A woman alone with no money? No family? Mrs. Patterson's face hardened. We're all trapped in our own ways, Mrs. Granger. The question is whether you're brave enough or foolish enough to try and break free. Clara wrote it all down, her hand cramping from the speed. Names, dates, incidents, a pattern of abuse and corruption stretching back decades. Why are you telling me this? Clara asked. You could stay silent, stay safe. Mrs. Patterson looked away, her fingers worrying at her apron. Because my husband and I have been trying to sell this store for 5 years. Want to move back east, be near our grandchildren. But Wexford won't let us. Says we're too valuable to the community, that he needs us here. It's a cage made of pretty words, but it's still a cage. She met Clara's eyes. If there's even a chance you and your husband can bring that man down, I'll help however I can. Clara left the general store with pages of notes and a growing sense of dread. If Wexford's reach extended this far, if even the most respectable citizens were living in fear, how could she and Cole possibly stand against him? She spent the rest of the morning moving through town, talking to whoever would speak with her. The seamstress who'd been forced to sell her building to Wexford at half its value. The banker's wife who whispered about suspicious transactions and missing funds. The boarding house owner who'd seen Lance Wexford stumble in drunk and boasting about teaching Granger a lesson the week before the fire. By noon, Clara's satchel was heavy with testimony, and her head ached from the heat and the weight of so much suffering. She was heading back to the wagon when she heard a familiar voice. Well, well, if it isn't the blushing bride. She turned to find Lance Wexford leaning against a post outside the saloon, a glass of whiskey in his hand despite the early hour. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothing disheveled, and there was a cruel twist to his mouth that made her skin crawl. Mr. Wexford. She kept her voice neutral, her body angled toward the wagon, calculating the distance. All alone in town? How very trusting of your husband to let you wander around unprotected. He pushed off the post and took a step toward her. Especially considering what happened to the Jensens last night. Terrible business, that. I heard about it. Cowardly, attacking innocent people in the dark. Lance's smile widened. Is it cowardly to send a message? Sometimes people need to understand there are consequences for their choices. Clara's hand tightened on her satchel. What do you want, Lance? Just to talk, to offer some friendly advice. He moved closer, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the rage simmering beneath his polite facade. Your husband embarrassed me in front of this whole town. That's not something I forgive easily. Then take it up with Cole. Leave me out of your feud. But you're not out of it, are you? You're right in the middle. A weakness he never had before. A soft spot that can be exploited. His gaze dropped to her belly with undisguised malice. How far along are you now? 7 months? 8? Be a shame if something happened, if all that trouble you went through to trap a husband ended with nothing to show for it. The threat was clear, unmistakable. Clara felt rage flood through her, hot and clarifying. You touch me or my child and Cole will kill you. Your father won't be able to protect you. My father protects me from everything. That's what power means, Mrs. Granger. It means doing whatever you want and never facing consequences. He reached out suddenly, grabbing her arm with bruising force. It means taking what you want, when you want it. Clara reacted without thinking, swinging her satchel with all her strength. It caught Lance across the side of his head, heavy with papers and pencils. He staggered back, more surprised than hurt, and in that moment Clara ran. She made it to the wagon, hauled herself up with desperate strength, and grabbed the reins. The horses started forward just as Lance recovered, shouting curses after her. She didn't look back, just drove the team as fast as she dared through the dusty streets, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was halfway back to the ranch when she saw the smoke. It rose in a dark column against the brilliant blue sky, coming from the direction of home. Clara's blood turned to ice. She snapped the reins harder, pushing the horses faster despite the heat, despite the rough road. Please, she prayed to any power that might be listening, please let them be safe. The ranch came into view and her worst fears materialized. The barn was engulfed in flames, black smoke billowing into the sky. Figures moved in the yard, Cole and Silas with buckets, trying desperately to contain the blaze, to keep it from spreading to the house. Clara barely got the wagon stopped before she was climbing down, running toward the house despite her ungainly bulk. "Benny! Where's Benny?" Cole turned, his face blackened with soot, his eyes wild. "He's safe! He's in the house!" She stumbled up the porch steps and through the door, calling her son's name. She found him huddled in the pantry exactly where she'd told him to hide, tears streaming down his face. "Mama!" He launched himself at her, and she caught him, holding him tight. "You're all right. You're safe. Good boy. Such a good boy for hiding." "Men came," he sobbed against her shoulder. "Bad men. They poured something on the barn and threw fire. I wanted to help, but you said to hide, so I hid." "You did exactly right, sweetheart. Exactly right." She carried him out onto the porch, keeping him close as they watched the barn burn. There was no saving it now. The fire had taken too much hold, the timbers collapsing in showers of sparks. All they could do was watch and make sure the flames didn't spread. It took hours for the fire to burn itself out, leaving nothing but a blackened skeleton and the acrid smell of destruction. Cole and Silas stood in the yard, exhausted and filthy, staring at the ruins. "All our winter hay," Silas said quietly. "The feed for the horses, the tools, the saddles. Everything." Cole's face was a mask carved from stone. "They're escalating. Wexford's done with subtle threats." "Cole." Clara approached carefully, aware of the rage radiating from him like heat from the dying embers. "I need to tell you what happened in town. What Lance said to me." As she recounted the confrontation, Cole's expression grew darker, more dangerous. By the time she finished, his hands were clenched into fists, the muscles in his jaw working. "He put his hands on you." "I'm fine. I got away." "He threatened our child." "Cole, listen to me." "No." He turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. A cold, calculated fury that made her take an involuntary step back. "This ends now. I'm going to town. I'm going to find Lance Wexford, and I'm going to beat him within an inch of his life. And then I'm going to his father's estate, and I'm going to settle this once and for all." That's exactly what they want. They're trying to provoke you into doing something that will justify killing you. "I don't care anymore. They burned my barn, threatened my wife, terrorized my son. Line's been crossed, Clara. There's no going back." Silas stepped forward, placing himself between them. "Cole, she's right. You go after Lance now. You're playing into their hands. We need to be smart about this." "Smart?" Cole's laugh was harsh, bitter. "I've been smart for 3 years. I've been patient, careful, restrained. And what did it get me? My barn burned, my neighbors terrorized, my wife assaulted in broad daylight. Number 1, I'm done being smart." He started toward the house, clearly intending to get his guns, but Silas grabbed his arm with his one good hand. "Wait. Just wait and think for a minute. You're the best man I know, Cole Granger. Don't let them turn you into something you're not. Don't let rage make you into a killer." "I already am a killer. I just haven't admitted it yet." The quiet confession hung in the smoky air. Clara moved closer, placing herself in front of Cole, forcing him to look at her. "You're a good man," she said firmly. "A man who took in a desperate woman and her child when he had every reason to turn us away. A man who chose honesty over convenience, who built something instead of destroying. Don't let them take that away from you. They already took everything. My wife, my daughter, my peace. Now they're coming for you and Benny and the baby. How am I supposed to protect you if I don't fight back?" "By being smarter than them. By finding the evidence we need to destroy them legally, permanently." She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. "I got testimony today, Cole. Real testimony from people willing to stand up. Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, the boarding house owner. We have witnesses now. We have a case." But Cole looked down at her, some of the rage fading from his eyes to be replaced by exhaustion and something that looked like despair. "It won't be enough. Wexford owns the courts. Then we go higher. Territorial governor, federal marshals, newspapers in bigger cities. We make enough noise that he can't silence us all. Clara's voice grew stronger, more certain. But we do it the right way. We don't give him an excuse to call you a murderer, to turn you into the villain. We beat him at his own game. Silas nodded slowly. She's right, Cole. Violence is what he expects, what he wants. Legal warfare, documentation, testimony, public pressure. That's terrain where he's vulnerable. For a long moment, Cole didn't move. Then he pulled Clara into his arms, holding her with desperate strength, his face buried in her hair. She felt him shaking, with rage or grief or fear. She couldn't tell. Maybe all three. I can't lose you, he whispered against her ear. Any of you. I can't go through that again. You won't. We'll fight together, and we'll win together. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But I need you clear-headed and alive, not dead or in prison. Can you do that for me? For us? He nodded slowly, and she felt some of the terrible tension leave his body. Yeah, I can do that. The moment was shattered by the sound of hooves, a single rider coming fast up the road. All three of them tensed, Cole's hand going to his pistol, but the rider raised his arms in a gesture of peace as he approached. It was a young man Clara didn't recognize, maybe 18, with a frightened face and trembling hands. He pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the yard, eyeing the burned barn with wide eyes. Mr. Granger, I got a message for you, from Mrs. Vivian Wexford. Cole's eyebrows rose. The judge's wife? Yes, sir. She asked me to tell you she needs to speak with you. Tonight, after dark. Says she has information about the fire, about what really happened. But it has to be secret. If the judge finds out she's talking to you, he'll... The boy swallowed hard. She says he'll kill her. Clara felt her pulse quicken. Where does she want to meet? Old Miller Place, the abandoned homestead about 3 miles north of here. She'll be there at midnight. The boy handed over a sealed envelope. She wanted you to have this, to prove it's really from her. Cole took the envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery with a few lines written in elegant script and a distinctive signature. His face went carefully neutral as he read it. Could be a trap, Silas warned. Could be. Cole looked at Clara. Could also be the break we need. Vivian Wexford would know everything. Her husband's business dealings, his secrets, maybe even proof of his involvement in the fire. If she's willing to betray him, she must be desperate, Clara said. Mrs. Patterson told me she's been abused for years. Maybe she's finally ready to escape. The young messenger shifted nervously in his saddle. I'm supposed to wait for your answer. Will you come? Cole studied the letter for another moment, then looked up at Clara. She saw the question in his eyes and understood what he was really asking, whether she trusted him to be smart about this, to not let rage override judgment. We'll come, Clara said before Cole could answer. All three of us. Safety in numbers, and Mrs. Wexford might be more willing to talk to another woman anyway. The boy nodded, relief crossing his face. I'll tell her. Midnight at the Miller Place. And sir, be careful. The judge has men watching the roads at night. You'll need to go cross-country to avoid them. He wheeled his horse and took off at a gallop, leaving them standing in the ruins of their burned barn with a dangerous decision to make. Could be a trap, Silas repeated. Probably is, Cole agreed. But Clara's right. If Vivian Wexford is willing to talk, willing to provide evidence, it could change everything. Then we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Clara looked at the darkening sky, calculating hours. That gives us time to gather weapons, plan our route, make arrangements for Benny. No, Cole's voice was firm. Benny stays here. I'm not bringing a child into a potential ambush. Then who stays with him? We can't leave him alone, not after today. They looked at each other, the same thought occurring to all three simultaneously. There was no good option. Either they left Benny vulnerable at the ranch, or they brought him into danger with them, or one of them stayed behind and reduced their strength for whatever lay ahead. I'll stay, Silas said finally. You two are the ones Vivian asked to meet. I'll guard the house, make sure Benny's safe. You get the evidence we need. Cole started to protest, but Silas cut him off. It's the right call and you know it. Besides, I'm better at defending a fixed position than I am at sneaking through the dark cross-country. One arm limits my options. It was decided. They spent the remaining daylight hours preparing, loading weapons, planning their route. writing down everything they knew in case something went wrong and someone else needed to continue the fight. Clara watched Cole methodically check his rifle and pistol, loading extra ammunition, his movements precise and controlled. He'd pulled himself back from the edge, she realized. The conversation, the evidence she'd gathered, the promise of a real chance to bring Wexford down legally. It had given him something to focus on besides rage. As the sun set in a blaze of orange and red, they ate a quiet dinner that none of them tasted. Benny sensed the tension and stayed close to Clara, his small hand finding hers repeatedly, as if to reassure himself she was still there. "I need you to be brave tonight," she told him as she tucked him into bed. "Silas is going to stay with you while Cole and I go do something very important. You'll be safe with him." "When will you come back?" "Before morning, I promise." "What if the bad men come again?" Clara smoothed his hair back from his forehead, her heart aching. "Then Silas will protect you, and you'll hide like the clever boy you are. But we're going to make it so the bad men can't hurt us anymore, sweetheart. We're going to stop them." She kissed his forehead and left him there, knowing Silas would check on him throughout the night. Downstairs, Cole was waiting, dressed in dark clothing, weapons secured. He looked like what he was, a dangerous man preparing for war. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Clara thought about the baby moving inside her, about Benny upstairs, about the life they were trying to build on this blood-soaked land. She thought about Vivian Wexford, trapped in an abusive marriage and finally brave enough to reach out for help. She thought about justice and revenge and the fine line between them. "Ready," she said. They slipped out into the night, leaving Silas standing guard on the porch with a rifle across his knees and a grim expression on his weathered face. The moon was 3/4 full, providing enough light to navigate by as they made their way north through the grassland, avoiding the roads where Wexford's men might be watching. It was slow going, especially for Clara, with her pregnancy making every step awkward. Cole matched his pace to hers, his hand on her elbow when the ground was rough, his eyes constantly scanning the darkness for threats. They moved through a landscape painted in shades of silver and shadow, the only sounds their footsteps in the dry grass and the distant call of coyotes. The abandoned Miller homestead came into view around 11:30, a sagging house and collapsed barn, relics of someone else's failed dreams. A single horse was tied near the house, and as they approached, a figure emerged from the shadows. Vivian Wexford was nothing like Clara had expected. She'd imagined someone regal, imperious, matching the judge's cultivated sophistication. Instead, the woman who stepped into the moonlight looked fragile, almost ethereal, with dark hair pulled back severely, and a face that might have been beautiful if not for the purple bruise darkening her left cheekbone and the split in her lower lip. She was dressed in a simple dark dress, no jewelry, no adornment, and she was carrying a leather satchel that looked heavy, important. "Mr. Granger, Mrs. Granger." Her voice was soft, cultured, with the faintest trace of a southern accent. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Cole approached cautiously, his hand near his pistol. "Ma'am, you said you had information about the fire." "I do. But first, I need to know—" She looked at Clara, her eyes searching. "If I give you what I have, if I testify against my husband, will you help me disappear? Will you help me start over somewhere he can never find me?" Clara stepped forward, her heart breaking for this terrified woman. "Yes, we'll help you, I promise." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "Then I'll tell you everything, because I can't live in that house anymore, with that monster, knowing what he's done and staying silent about it." She opened the satchel with shaking hands. "My husband keeps records of everything, every crime, every bribe, every piece of corruption. He's meticulous, obsessive about documentation. He thinks keeping records protects him, gives him leverage." She pulled out a stack of ledgers and papers, handing them to Cole. "These are his private accounts. Embezzlement from county funds, bribes paid to officials, payments to hired men for various services rendered, including the fire at your ranch 3 years ago." Cole's hands trembled as he opened the first ledger, and even in the moonlight, Clara could see his face go pale. This is everything." "There's more." Vivian pulled out another sheaf of papers. "Deeds and contracts obtained through fraud, testimony he coerced or bought, evidence he suppressed, 20 years of corruption, all documented in his own hand. Why? Clara asked. Why keep records of his own crimes? Because my husband is a narcissist who believes he's untouchable. He keeps these as trophies, as proof of his power and cleverness. Vivian's voice hardened. And because he uses them to control people, if anyone crosses him, he can prove their involvement in his schemes, drag them down with him. It's insurance and blackmail all in one. Cole looked up from the ledgers, his expression fierce with hope and rage. This is enough. This is more than enough to destroy him. It is. But you need to act fast. He doesn't know I took these yet, but when he discovers they're missing... Vivian's voice broke. He'll know it was me. He'll come looking. Then you're coming with us right now, Clara said. Back to the ranch. Then we'll get you somewhere safe while Cole takes this evidence to the territorial governor. There's one more thing. Vivian reached into the satchel and pulled out a final envelope. The night of the fire at your ranch, my son Lance came home drunk, covered in soot and smelling of kerosene. He was laughing, boasting to his father about how well it had gone, how the Granger family would be dead by morning. Tears streamed down her face. I wrote down everything he said, everything I heard, dates, times, details. It's all in here, signed and witnessed. She handed the envelope to Cole with trembling hands. I should have come forward 3 years ago, should have stopped them before your wife and daughter died. But I was a coward, too afraid of what my husband would do to me. She met his eyes. I can't bring them back, but maybe this can give you justice. Maybe it can stop him from hurting anyone else. Cole took the envelope, and Clara saw his throat working as he tried to control his emotions. Thank you, he managed finally. Thank you for being brave enough to do this now. We need to move, Clara said, hearing the urgency in her own voice. If the judge realizes these are missing... She was cut off by the sound of hoofbeats, multiple riders coming fast. Vivian's face went white with terror. He knows! Somehow he knows! Cole grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her toward the old house. Inside now! Vivian, come on! They scrambled through the sagging doorway just as riders burst into the clearing, at least 8 men, maybe more, with Judge Wexford himself at the front on a magnificent black horse. Moonlight gleamed on rifle barrels and the silver badge on Sheriff Morrison's chest. Vivian! Wexford's voice boomed across the clearing. I know you're in there. Come out now and I might show mercy. Cole positioned himself at a window, rifle ready, while Clara pulled Vivian down behind an overturned table. The older woman was shaking so violently her teeth chattered. How did he know? She whispered. How did he find us? Doesn't matter now, Cole said grimly. What matters is getting out of this alive. He raised his voice. Wexford, this is my property. You're trespassing. Your property? The judge's laugh was cold, mocking. You really are delusional, Granger. This land belongs to the Miller estate, which I purchased last year, which means you're the one trespassing, along with my thieving wife and your pregnant whore. Clara felt rage surge through her at the insult, but Cole's hand on her shoulder kept her from responding. I have evidence of your crimes, Wexford, Cole shouted. Documentation of embezzlement, fraud, murder. You're finished. The only thing that's finished is you, Granger. Sheriff Morrison has a warrant for your arrest, assaulting my son, threatening an officer of the court, and now kidnapping my wife. Resist arrest, and he's authorized to use deadly force. Morrison's voice joined his boss's. Come out peacefully, Cole, and nobody has to get hurt. Nobody except me, you mean? Cole's bitter laugh echoed through the abandoned house. You think I'm fool enough to surrender to a corrupt sheriff and a judge who wants me dead? Clara clutched the satchel with its precious cargo of evidence, her mind racing. They were trapped, outnumbered, with no easy escape. But they had what they came for, proof that could destroy Wexford if it reached the right hands. Cole, she whispered urgently. The evidence. We have to protect it, get it out of here, even if... Don't! His voice was fierce. Don't even think about finishing that sentence. We're all getting out of this together. But if we don't, we will. Outside, Wexford's patience was wearing thin. You have 1 minute to send my wife out, Granger. After that, my men burn that house to the ground with all of you inside. How fitting. dying the same way your family did." The threat hung in the air like poison. Clara saw Cole's face go hard, saw his finger tighten on the rifle trigger. She saw Vivian press a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. And then, cutting through the tension like a knife, came a new sound, more hoofbeats coming from the south at a dead gallop. Everyone froze, turning toward the approaching rider. The horse burst into the clearing and Clara's heart nearly stopped. It was Silas, riding like a man half his age, his one arm gripping the reins while somehow managing to hold a rifle at the same time. But he wasn't alone. Behind him came more riders, Tom Jensen and his two grown sons, the Caldwell brothers, the Miller family, even old Mrs. Patterson's husband on an ancient mare. At least 20 people, all armed, all riding hard. They spread out in a loose circle around Wexford's men, and Clara understood. Silas had gathered the neighbors, the townspeople who'd been terrorized and threatened for too long. He'd called in every favor, appealed to every person who'd ever suffered under Wexford's corruption, and they'd answered. Tom Jensen spoke first, his rifle leveled at the judge. "Evening, Harlan. Seems like you're a long way from town at an unusual hour. What brings you out to this abandoned property in the middle of the night?" Wexford's face went purple with rage. "This doesn't concern you, Jensen. I'm conducting official business." "Burning another family to death?" Caldwell's voice was hard. "Because that's what it looks like to me. Same setup as the Granger fire 3 years ago. Isolated location, surrounded by armed men, threats of fire." "How dare you?" Wexford sputtered. "I'm a judge. You're interfering with murder," Mrs. Patterson's husband finished. "We all know what you are, Wexford. We've been too scared to say it, but we know, and we're done being silent." Morrison looked nervously between Wexford and the armed citizens, clearly trying to calculate which side would win if shooting started. His hand moved away from his pistol. "Smart man, Hank," Silas called out. "Now why don't you escort the good judge back to town before the situation gets any messier? I'm sure the territorial governor would be very interested to hear about a judge threatening to burn people alive." Inside the house, Cole moved to the door, still keeping his rifle ready. "Clara, bring the evidence. Vivian, stay close to her." They emerged into the moonlit clearing, Clara with the heavy satchel clutched against her chest, Vivian pale but composed. Cole kept his rifle trained on Wexford, his stance making it clear he'd shoot if provoked. "This isn't over, Granger," Wexford hissed. "You think these people will stand with you when I start applying pressure? When their livelihoods are on the line?" "Actually," Clara said, stepping forward with far more courage than she felt, "I think it is over. You see, your wife just gave us 20 years of documented evidence. Your own records, your own handwriting, proving embezzlement, fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder." She raised the satchel. "And tomorrow morning, copies of all of this are going to every newspaper in the territory, plus the federal marshal, the territorial governor, and anyone else who might be interested in systematic corruption." Wexford's face went from purple to white in an instant. "Vivian, what have you done?" His wife stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling. "What I should have done 20 years ago. I freed myself from you, Harlan. And I freed this town." For a moment, Wexford seemed to shrink, the powerful judge replaced by a frightened man watching his empire crumble. Then rage filled his face, and he spurred his horse forward, clearly intending to grab Vivian or the satchel, or both. Cole's rifle shot cracked through the night, and Wexford's horse reared, the bullet having passed so close to the judge's head that his hat flew off. Wexford fought to control his mount, his face a mask of impotent fury. "Next one goes through your skull," Cole said calmly. "Now get off my land, all of you, and tell your lawyers to prepare a defense, because we're coming for you with everything we've got." Morrison made the decision for them. "Come on, Judge, let's go. Nothing to be gained here tonight." Slowly, reluctantly, Wexford's men began to withdraw, their horses backing away from the armed citizens. Wexford himself sat frozen for a long moment, his eyes locked on his wife with such hatred that Clara instinctively moved to shield her. "You'll regret this, Vivian," he said quietly. "I promise you that." "The only thing I regret is not leaving you sooner," she replied, her voice stronger now. "Go home, Harlan. Your reign is over." He wheeled his horse and rode off into the darkness, his men following like shadows. The citizens of Granger's Bend held their positions until the hoofbeats faded completely, then slowly lowered their weapons. Silas approached, his weathered face creased with concern. "Everyone all right?" "We're alive," Cole said. "Thanks to you. How did you—" "Left Benny with Mrs. Jensen and rode like hell to gather everyone I could think of. Figured you might need backup." Silas grinned. "Guess I figured right." Tom Jensen moved his horse closer. "We should have stood up to Wexford years ago. Tonight felt good. Felt right." "Tonight was just the beginning," Clara said, lifting the satchel. "Tomorrow we start the real fight. Legal, documented, impossible to ignore. By the time we're done, Judge Harlan Wexford will be in a federal prison where he belongs." The citizens began to disperse, heading back to their homes with promises to stand witness when needed. Cole helped Vivian onto his horse, and Clara climbed up behind Silas, still clutching the precious evidence. They rode through the moonlit grassland toward Granger Creek Ranch, toward safety, and Benny, and the future they were fighting to build. The barn was still a smoking ruin when they arrived, but the house stood strong, and Mrs. Jensen met them on the porch with Benny safe in her arms. As Clara gathered her son close and Cole helped Vivian inside, she looked at the evidence-filled satchel sitting on the kitchen table and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not just hope, but certainty. They were going to win. Dawn broke over Granger Creek Ranch with a sky streaked red and gold, the kind of sunrise that in folklore meant either great fortune or blood on the horizon. Clara stood at the kitchen window watching the light spread across the scorched earth where the barn had stood, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. She'd been up all night, her mind too restless for sleep, her body too uncomfortable with the weight of the baby pressing against her ribs. Behind her, the house was quiet, except for the gentle sounds of breathing. Benny slept upstairs in his bed, exhausted from the terror of the previous day. Vivian Wexford had finally collapsed near midnight in the spare bedroom, her body giving out after years of fear and one night of impossible courage. Silas dozed in a chair by the front door, rifle across his lap, keeping watch even in sleep. And Cole sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by evidence that could destroy a man's empire, his dark eyes red-rimmed from reading through the night, his jaw tight with the kind of rage that came from seeing evil documented in meticulous detail. "There's enough here to hang him 10 times over," he said without looking up, his voice rough from disuse. "Embezzlement, fraud, bribery, conspiracy to commit arson and murder. 20 years of corruption, all in his own handwriting." Clara turned from the window and moved to sit beside him, her movements awkward with pregnancy. "Then we need to move fast. Make copies, get them to people who can act on them before Wexford has a chance to destroy the originals or silence Vivian." "Already thought of that." Cole pushed one ledger across to her, his finger marking a particular entry. "Look at this. June 15th, 1867, payment of $500 to J.M. for services rendered regarding Granger property dispute. That's 3 months before my father's barn burned down." Clara scanned the careful notation, the cold calculation behind each word. "Who's J.M.?" "Jake Morrison. Sheriff Hank Morrison's older brother. He was a known arsonist, killed a family down in Colorado Territory before he drifted up here. Died in a gunfight about 5 years back, but everyone knew what he was." Cole's hands clenched into fists. "Wexford paid him to burn my father's barn. Probably the same way he paid someone to burn mine and kill my family." "Does it say who he paid for your fire?" Cole flipped through pages with shaking hands, then stopped at an entry dated 3 years ago. His face went pale, then flushed with fury. "July 10th, payment of $1,000 to L.W. for permanent resolution of Granger problem. L.W. Lance Wexford, the judge's own son, paid to commit murder." Clara felt bile rise in her throat. His own son. He paid his own son to kill your family. And Lance was drunk enough or stupid enough to brag about it to his mother. Cole's voice was barely above a whisper, but the violence in it made the air feel heavy. "I could kill them both. Right now. Ride to town, walk into that house, and put bullets in both of them before anyone could stop me." "Cole, I know." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window, his broad shoulders rigid with tension. "I know that's exactly what they'd want. Give them an excuse to call it self-defense, to paint me as the violent madman they've always claimed I was. but knowing that doesn't make the wanting any less. Clara rose with effort and went to him, placing her hand on his back between his shoulder blades. She felt the tension there, the barely leashed fury that 3 years of grief had built into something dangerous. "We do this the right way," she said quietly. "We make copies of everything. We send them to the territorial governor, the federal marshal, every newspaper between here and Denver. We build a case so solid that even Wexford's money and influence can't save him, and then we watch him hang for what he's done." Cole turned to face her, his dark eyes searching hers. "You're stronger than I am. You know that?" "I'm not. I'm just too tired to let rage make my decisions anymore. I spent too many years being angry at Samuel, at my family, at myself. It didn't change anything. It just made me bitter." She cupped his face with both hands, feeling the rough stubble under her palms. "We have a chance here to actually win, Cole, to get justice for your family and protect ours. Don't throw it away for revenge." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "You got lucky when I was desperate enough to lie my way onto a stagecoach. Everything after that was just stubbornness on both our parts." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, and some of the terrible tension eased from his frame. "Well, thank heaven for desperation and stubbornness, then." They were interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Vivian Wexford appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking smaller and more fragile in the morning light than she had the night before. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to purple-black, and she moved like everything hurt. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't mean to intrude. I can go back upstairs." "Don't be ridiculous." Clara pulled out a chair at the table. "Sit. I'll make breakfast. You need to eat something." Vivian sank into the chair gratefully, her eyes going to the ledgers spread across the table. "You've been reading them." "All night," Cole confirmed. "Mrs. Wexford?" "Vivian, please. I don't want that name anymore." "Vivian," Cole's voice gentled. "The things documented here, the crimes your husband committed, you must have known about some of them over the years. Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Vivian's hands twisted in her lap, her voice barely audible. "Because I was a coward. Because I was terrified of what he'd do to me. Because I'd been raised to believe that a wife's duty was to stand by her husband no matter what, that divorce was a sin worse than any crime he might commit." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "And because by the time I realized what kind of monster I'd married, I was already trapped. No money of my own, no family willing to take me in, nowhere to run that he couldn't find me." Clara set a cup of coffee in front of her, then began preparing eggs and biscuits at the stove. "What changed? What made you finally decide to act?" "Your arrival." Vivian looked up at Clara, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "When Lance came home that day and told his father about confronting you in town, about threatening your unborn child, I saw Harlan smile. He actually smiled and told Lance he'd done well, that fear was an excellent weapon." Her voice broke. "I realized then that it would never stop, that he'd keep destroying lives, keep hurting people, and I'd keep enabling it by staying silent. I couldn't live with myself anymore." "Well, you're safe now," Silas said from his position by the door, making them all jump slightly. None of them had heard him wake. "And you did the right thing, ma'am. Took courage to stand up to a man like Wexford." "I don't feel courageous. I feel terrified." Vivian wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, as if drawing warmth from it despite the summer heat already building outside. "Harlan will come for me. He'll never let me go, never let me testify against him. He'd rather kill me than let me destroy him." "Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance." Cole returned to the table, his tactical mind clearly working through possibilities. "We need to get you out of the territory entirely, somewhere he can't reach you until the trial, somewhere safe with people who'll protect you." "I have a sister in St. Louis," Vivian said hesitantly. "We haven't spoken in years. She disapproved of my marriage, tried to warn me about Harlan, but she might take me in." "That's good. That's perfect." Cole was already planning, his finger tracing routes on an imaginary map. "We put you on a stagecoach today, send you east with enough money to start over. You stay hidden until we send word that it's safe to testify." "But the evidence, won't you need me to authenticate it? To confirm these are Harlan's records?" "We'll make sworn statements from you before you leave, and we'll have enough corroboration from other sources that your testimony, while powerful, won't be the only thing holding up the case. Cole looked at Clara. We need to move on this today. Every hour we wait is another hour for Wexford to realize how badly he's exposed and start covering his tracks. Clara served breakfast while they strategized, the morning sun climbing higher and the heat beginning to build. Benny came downstairs rubbing sleep from his eyes, and Clara pulled him onto her lap while they ate, needing the contact and comfort of her son's solid warmth. "Mama, why is there a lady at our table?" he whispered. "This is Mrs. Wexford, sweetheart. She's a friend who needs our help." Benny studied Vivian with the frank curiosity of children. "You have a hurt on your face." Vivian's hand went instinctively to her bruised cheek. "Yes, I had an accident. My mama used to have hurts like that. Before we left our old house, she said she fell, but I heard the yelling." Benny's voice was matter-of-fact, innocent in the way of children who'd seen too much. "Is someone mean to you too?" The table went silent. Clara felt her heart break at her son's casual revelation, at the knowledge that he'd witnessed more than she'd realized. Vivian's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Yes, sweetheart," she said gently. "Someone was very mean to me, but your mama and Cole are helping me get away, helping me be safe, just like you and your mama got away and found safety here." Benny nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. "That's good. It's nice here. Cole and Silas are kind. They don't yell or hurt people." After breakfast, they divided the tasks. Silas would ride to the neighboring ranches and gather sworn statements from everyone who'd witnessed Wexford's corruption over the years. Cole would go into town to the telegraph office and send wires to the territorial governor, the federal marshal, and every newspaper editor he could think of, alerting them to the evidence and requesting protection for witnesses. Clara would stay on the ranch with Vivian and Benny, making meticulous copies of the most damning ledger entries in case the originals were somehow lost or destroyed. But first, they needed to document Vivian's testimony while her memory was fresh and her courage still held. Clara sat at the table with paper and pen, writing as fast as her hand could move while Vivian talked. The older woman's voice was steady at first, reciting facts and dates with the precision of someone who'd been paying attention for years. But as she delved deeper into the abuse she'd suffered, the crimes she'd witnessed, her composure began to crack. "He broke my arm once," she said, her voice distant, as if speaking about someone else. "Twisted it behind my back until I felt the bone snap. Told the doctor I'd fallen down the stairs. The doctor knew. I could see it in his eyes, but he said nothing. Just set the bone and gave me laudanum for the pain." Clara's hand trembled as she wrote, but she kept her voice calm. "When was this?" 5 years ago. After I questioned a business decision, suggested he was being too harsh with a tenant farmer who couldn't pay rent." Vivian laughed bitterly. "I learned not to question him after that. Learned to smile and nod and pretend I didn't see what he was doing." "What about Lance? Your son? Was he abused too?" "No. Harlan doted on Lance, groomed him to be just like himself, taught him that power was everything, that ordinary people existed only to be used and discarded. Lance learned those lessons well." Her voice hardened. "Too well. He's become everything his father is, but without even the pretense of civilization. At least Harlan maintains appearances. Lance doesn't bother. Tell me about Lance's wife, Nora." Vivian's face crumpled. "That poor girl, she was so young when Lance married her, barely 19. Pretty, naive, from a respectable family that had fallen on hard times. Harlan arranged the marriage, paid off her father's debts in exchange for her hand. She thought she was saving her family." Vivian's volt clenched into fists. Within 6 months, she was covered in bruises. Within a year, she'd stopped smiling entirely. I tried to help her, tried to slip her money so she could run, but she's too afraid. And where would she go? Her own family sold her to Lance. She has no one. Clara wrote it all down, her heart aching for these women trapped by men who saw them as property. When Vivian's statement was finally complete, Clara read it back to ensure accuracy, then had Vivian sign and date it. The signature was shaky but clear, a legal document that could help bring down a corrupt empire. Cole returned from town just before noon, his face grim. Telegraph office was closed. Sign on the door said, "Equipment malfunction, reopening tomorrow." That's convenient timing, Silas muttered. Wexford probably paid the operator to shut down, keep you from sending those wires. Probably. But I found another way. Cole pulled out a sealed envelope. Gave this to Pastor Mills. He's riding to the next county over to send the telegrams from there. Plus, he's carrying copies of the most damaging evidence to hand-deliver to the territorial governor in person. Can you trust him? Clara asked. He's one of the few men in this territory Wexford hasn't managed to buy or intimidate. And he's furious about what's in those ledgers. There's entries about bribes paid to church officials, about using religion to control people. Mills takes his calling seriously. He'll get the evidence where it needs to go. Vivian stood, her voice trembling but determined. Then I should leave now while there's still time, before Harlan realizes I'm not coming back. They prepared quickly. Clara helped Vivian pack a small bag with the few belongings they could spare, a change of clothes, food for the journey, enough money that Cole quietly pressed into her hands over her protests. Silas hitched up the wagon to take her to the next town over, where she could catch a stagecoach heading east without going through Granger's Bend, where Wexford's men might be watching. At the wagon, Vivian turned to Clara and gripped her hands tightly. Thank you. For believing me, for protecting me, for giving me a chance at a life I'd stopped dreaming was possible. Thank you for being brave enough to do the right thing. Your testimony is going to save lives, Vivian. Remember that when you're frightened. They embraced briefly, two women who'd both been broken by violent men and were learning to stand up despite the fear. Then Vivian climbed into the wagon beside Silas, and they rumbled down the road, leaving Clara standing in the yard with one hand pressed to her aching back and the other shading her eyes against the merciless sun. Cole came to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. You all right? My back hurts. The baby's been restless all day. And I can't shake the feeling that we're forgetting something, that Wexford has another move we haven't anticipated. He probably does. But we've done everything we can for now. The evidence is copied and distributed, Vivian's on her way to safety, and we've got sworn statements from half the county. All we can do is wait and prepare for whatever comes next. What came next arrived 3 hours later in the form of a lone rider carrying a white flag tied to a stick. Cole saw him coming from a distance and ordered Clara and Benny into the house before stepping onto the porch with his rifle ready. The rider was young, maybe 16, with frightened eyes and trembling hands. He stopped at the edge of the yard, keeping the white flag raised high. Mr. Granger, I got a message from Judge Wexford. He wants to parley. Tell the judge to go to hell, Cole shouted back. Please, sir. He said to tell you he's willing to negotiate. Said he knows you have his wife and his records, and he's willing to make a deal. Cole's laugh was harsh. A deal? After everything he's done, he thinks I'd negotiate with him? He said, the boy's voice cracked with fear. He said to tell you he has something you want, someone you want. And if you don't come talk to him, that someone's going to suffer for it. Ice flooded Clara's veins. She moved to the window, watching Cole's face go rigid with fury and fear. Who? Cole's voice was deadly calm. Who does he have? I don't know, sir. He just said you'd understand and you'd come. He's waiting at his estate, said he'll give you until sunset to show up. If you don't, he starts... The boy couldn't finish the sentence, just shook his head and turned his horse, galloping away before Cole could press for more information. Cole stood frozen for a moment, then spun and strode into the house. Silas, when did Silas leave with Vivian? Clara checked the clock on the mantel. About 3 hours ago. They should be almost to Riverside Station by now, maybe already there. Unless they were intercepted. Cole's face was ashen. Wexford must have had men watching the roads. Must have figured we'd try to get Vivian out of the territory. If they captured Silas and Vivian... He didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. Clara's mind filled with horrifying possibilities, with images of Silas overpowered despite his skill, of Vivian dragged back to the hell she'd just escaped. We don't know that's what happened, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady, even as panic clawed at her chest. Maybe Wexford's bluffing, trying to draw you out. And maybe he's not. Maybe he has them both, and he's going to torture Vivian for information while I sit here doing nothing. Cole grabbed his gun belt, strapping it on with sharp, angry movements. I have to go. Have to find out what he wants, what he's willing to trade. It's a trap, Cole. You know it's a trap. I don't care. If there's even a chance he has Silas and Vivian, I can't leave them to whatever he has planned. He checked his pistol, his movements automatic, born of years of frontier living. You stay here with Benny. Lock the doors, keep the rifle loaded. If anyone comes except me or Silas, you shoot first and don't ask questions. I'm not letting you walk into Wexford's estate alone. That's suicide. What choice do I have? Cole's voice rose, frustration and fear bleeding through. If I don't go, people I care about will suffer. If I do go, maybe I can negotiate something, buy time, find a way to get them out safely. Or you'll get yourself killed and leave me alone to raise 2 children in the middle of this nightmare. Clara's own voice cracked, tears of anger and fear burning her eyes. You promised me we'd fight together, Cole. You promised you wouldn't let rage make your decisions. This isn't rage. This is responsibility. Silas is my friend, has been for years. He's saved my life more times than I can count. And Vivian trusted me to protect her, to get her to safety. If I failed, you didn't fail. Wexford is a monster who's always 3 steps ahead because he has no morals, no lines he won't cross. You can't beat him by playing his game on his terms. They stood facing each other in the kitchen, both breathing hard, the weight of impossible choices crushing down on them. Benny watched from the doorway, his small face pale and frightened. Cole's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. What am I supposed to do, Clara? Just wait here while they suffer? While Wexford does to them what he did to my family? No, you're supposed to be smart about this, strategic. Clara moved to the table where they'd laid out all the evidence, her mind racing through possibilities. Wexford wants to negotiate. That means he's scared. He knows the evidence is out there, knows his empire is crumbling. He's desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we give him what he wants, but not in the way he expects. We agree to negotiate, but we do it on our terms, in a public place where he can't just kill you and claim self-defense. We bring witnesses, make sure everyone knows where you're going and why. We make it impossible for him to hurt you without exposing himself. Cole stared at her, hope and doubt warring in his expression. That could work, but where? Any public place in Granger's Bend he controls. The sheriff, the merchants, everyone's either bought or terrified. Clara thought hard, then had it. The church, Pastor Mills' church. Sacred ground, and Mills is already on our side. Wexford won't dare commit violence there, not with his public image as a respectable Christian man. Mills is gone, delivering the evidence to the governor. But his church is still there, and his deacon, Mr. Hawthorne, is a good man who hates corruption. Clara was gaining confidence in the plan, seeing how it could work. We send word to Wexford that you'll meet him at the church at sunset. Public negotiation, witnesses present. He brings whoever he claims to have, you bring the leverage he wants. Clean exchange. What leverage? We already sent the evidence away. Clara smiled grimly. He doesn't know that. He thinks we still have the originals, thinks we're desperate to protect them. We let him believe that, use it to bargain for Silas and Vivian's safety. Cole studied her face for a long moment, then shook his head in something like wonder. You're brilliant. Terrifying, but brilliant. I'm motivated. I have a family to protect and a future to secure. Now let's send that message before Wexford decides to make good on his threats. They composed the message carefully, making it clear that Cole would negotiate, but only on his terms. A young boy from a neighboring ranch was paid handsomely to ride to the Wexford estate and deliver it, with instructions to wait for a response. The boy returned within the hour, breathless and wide-eyed. Judge Wexford says he agrees, says he'll meet you at the church at sunset, but Mr. Granger, the boy's voice dropped to a frightened whisper. I saw them, in the judge's cellar. Mr. Boone and a lady, they're chained up, sir. The lady was crying. Clara felt her heart drop. So it was true. Wexford really did have them. Cole's face went hard as stone. Were they hurt? Could you tell? Mr. Boone had blood on his face, like he'd been hit. The lady seemed scared, but not bleeding that I could see. The judge had men guarding them, at least 4 that I counted. 4 guards for 2 prisoners, one of whom only has 1 arm. Wexford's taking this seriously. Cole handed the boy more money. You did well. Now go home and stay there. Don't come back to the ranch or go near town. This is going to get dangerous. As the boy rode off, Clara moved to the window, calculating the sun's position. 4 hours until sunset. 4 hours to prepare for a confrontation that could end with Cole dead or imprisoned or worse. "We need backup," she said. "People who'll stand with us, who'll make sure Wexford can't just grab you and claim you never showed up. The neighbors who came last night think they'd come again. They stood against Wexford once. Maybe they'll do it again." Clara was already moving, gathering paper to write quick notes. "We send writers to Jensen, Caldwell, Patterson, everyone who was there. We tell them what's happening and ask them to be at the church as witnesses, safety in numbers." They worked quickly, writing messages and finding trustworthy people to deliver them. As the afternoon wore on, responses began trickling back. Yes, Jensen would be there. Yes, the Caldwells would come. Yes, Mrs. Patterson and her husband would stand witness. One by one, the community that had been terrorized for too long agreed to stand together one more time. But as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Clara felt a sharp pain lance through her belly. She gasped and gripped the edge of the table, breathing through it. "Clara?" Cole was at her side instantly, his hand on her back. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just the baby moving. It's been doing that all day." She straightened as the pain faded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine." But an hour later, as they were preparing to leave for town, another pain came, sharper this time, unmistakable. Clara's water broke in a sudden gush that soaked through her dress and pooled on the kitchen floor. She stood frozen, staring down at the evidence that her body had chosen the absolute worst possible moment to go into labor. "No," she whispered. "No, not now, not yet. It's too early." Cole's face went pale. "How early?" 7 months, maybe 7.5. Another contraction hit, stronger than the first, and Clara doubled over with a cry she couldn't suppress. "The baby's coming, Cole. Right now." For a moment, Cole looked completely lost, his tactical mind unable to process this new, impossible situation. Then his training took over, and he moved with swift efficiency. "Benny, go upstairs to your room and stay there. Clara, we need to get you to bed. I'll send for the doctor. The doctor is in Wexford's pocket. He won't come, or worse, he'll come and do something to hurt me or the baby." Clara gritted her teeth through another contraction, trying to think clearly through the pain. "And we don't have time anyway. The baby's coming fast." "Then what do we do?" Clara looked at her husband, at this big, fierce man who'd faced down armed enemies without flinching, but looked terrified of childbirth. "You're going to that church. You're going to get Silas and Vivian back. And I'm going to have this baby and pray we both survive it. I'm not leaving you alone to give birth. You don't have a choice." Another contraction, harder, closer. Clara felt her knees buckle, and Cole caught her, lifting her easily despite her weight. "If you don't go, Wexford wins. He keeps his prisoners. He keeps his power. And everything we've fought for means nothing. The community needs to see you stand up to him, needs to see that he can be beaten." Cole carried her upstairs to their bedroom, his face a mask of anguish. "I can't lose you, Clara. I can't go through that again." "You won't." She gripped his hand with crushing strength as another contraction peaked. "I'm too stubborn to die. But Silas and Vivian won't last the night if you don't get them out of that cellar. You know what Wexford will do to them." He laid her gently on the bed, then knelt beside it, his large hand cradling her face. "This is impossible. How am I supposed to choose?" "You're not choosing. We're both doing what we have to do." Clara managed a weak smile through the pain. "I've done this before, remember? I had Benny with no help, no doctor, nothing but determination. I can do it again. But you're the only one who can face Wexford, who can rally the community and end this once and for all." Cole pressed his forehead against hers, his breath shaky. "I love you. I should have said it before now, should have told you every day since you arrived. But I love you, Clara Granger, you and Benny and this baby. You're my family." Tears streamed down her face from pain and emotion and fear. "I love you too. Now go, and come back to us alive." He kissed her fiercely, desperately, then stood and moved to the door. He paused there, looking back at her one more time. "What should I name her?" Clara called out, another contraction making her voice tight. "If it's a girl, and if something happens to me, what should we call her?" Cole's voice was rough with emotion. Mara. It means bitter, but also strong, like you. Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs, the front door closing behind him. Claire heard the wagon pull away, carrying her husband toward a confrontation that could end in his death, leaving her alone with a 5-year-old boy and a baby being born too soon. She breathed through the contractions, counting the seconds between them, feeling them grow closer together. Benny appeared in the doorway, his face frightened. "Mama, are you all right?" "Come here, sweetheart." She held out her hand and he climbed onto the bed beside her. "The baby's coming. I need you to be very brave for me. Can you do that?" He nodded, his small hand gripping hers. "Good boy. Now listen carefully. I need you to get me towels from the linen closet and water. Fill the pitcher and basin. Can you do that?" Benny scrambled to obey, grateful for a task, for something concrete to do. Claire used the brief respite to gather her strength, to remember everything she'd learned from Benny's birth 5 years ago in a Kansas City tenement with no one to help her but an elderly neighbor who'd seen it all before. She could do this. She had to do this. Because miles away, in a church that was supposed to be sanctuary, her husband was walking into a trap armed with nothing but courage and the desperate hope that good could triumph over evil. And somewhere in a dark cellar, Silas and Vivian were praying that someone would come for them before it was too late. The sun touched the horizon, painting the world in shades of blood and gold, and Clara Granger screamed as her daughter fought to be born into a world of violence and hope, of endings and desperate new beginnings. The church stood silhouetted against the dying light, its white-painted boards glowing amber in the sunset. Cole drove the wagon down Main Street with his rifle across his lap and rage burning cold in his chest, every muscle tense as he scanned for threats. Behind him, riding in pairs and small groups, came the neighbors who'd answered the call, Jensen and his sons, the Caldwell brothers, Mrs. Patterson and her husband, nearly 30 people in all. They formed a loose procession that drew stares from townspeople peering nervously through windows. Word had spread fast. The showdown everyone had whispered about for 3 years was finally happening. Cole's mind was split between the confrontation ahead and the woman he'd left bleeding and in pain at the ranch. Every instinct screamed at him to turn the wagon around, to go back to Clara, to be there when his daughter was born. But Clara was right. If he didn't face Wexford now, if he didn't end this tonight, there would be no safe future for any of them. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the church and climbed down, checking his pistol one more time. Tom Jensen approached, his weathered face grim. "We're with you, Cole. Whatever happens in there, you're not alone." "I appreciate it, Tom, but this could get ugly fast. Wexford's not going to surrender quietly." "Then it gets ugly. We're all tired of living in fear of that man. Time someone stood up to him permanent-like." The church door opened and Deacon Hawthorne emerged, a tall man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen combat in his younger days. "Mr. Granger, the judge is already inside with his men. He's demanding you come in alone." "That's not happening," Cole said flatly. "I go in with witnesses, or I don't go in at all." Hawthorne nodded approvingly. "That's what I told him. He didn't like it much, but he agreed to let you bring 3 people. Choose carefully." Cole looked over the assembled crowd and selected quickly. "Tom Jensen, Mr. Patterson, and Deacon Hawthorne, if you're willing." "I'm willing. Been waiting years for someone to call Wexford to account in the house he claims to serve." Hawthorne's expression was hard. "He's defiled this place with his presence and his sins long enough." They entered together, Cole in front with the other 3 flanking him. The interior of the church was dim, lit only by a few oil lamps that cast long shadows across the pews. At the front, near the altar, stood Judge Harlan Wexford with 4 armed men arranged behind him. The judge looked every inch the powerful man he'd always been. Perfectly dressed despite the heat, silver hair immaculate, his face composed and confident. But his eyes betrayed him. They were wild, desperate, the eyes of a man watching his empire crumble and willing to do anything to prevent it. "Granger, punctual as always." Wexford's voice echoed in the empty church. "I appreciate you coming to discuss terms." "Where are they?" Cole's hand rested on his pistol grip. "Silas and Vivian. I want to see them now." Wexford gestured lazily, and 2 of his men disappeared through a side door. They returned moments later, dragging Silas between them, his one arm bound behind his back, his face bloody and swollen from a beating. Behind them came Vivian, her dress torn and dirty, her wrists raw from rope burns. Cole felt rage surge through him, hot and overwhelming. Silas met his eyes and shook his head slightly, a warning not to do anything rash. As you can see, they're alive. Uncomfortable, certainly, but alive. Wexford smiled coldly. Whether they remain that way depends entirely on you. What do you want? Simple. The ledgers you stole from my home. The original documents, not copies. I want them burned, along with any copies you've made. And I want my wife back. So you can kill her for betraying you? So I can deal with her as I see fit. She's my property, Granger. Same as my horse or my house. You have no right to keep her from me. Vivian made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. I'm not your property, Harlan. Not anymore. I'd rather die than go back to you. Wexford's face flushed with fury. You don't get a choice, you ungrateful bitch. I made you, gave you everything. A name, position, wealth. And this is how you repay me? By stealing from me? By running to my enemies? You broke my arm. You beat me for 20 years. You turned our son into a monster who beats his own wife. Vivian's voice grew stronger, years of suppressed rage finally finding outlet. You deserve everything that's coming to you. Enough! Wexford's shout echoed off the rafters. Granger, here are my terms. Give me the ledgers and my wife, and I'll let you and your crippled friend walk out of here alive. Refuse, and I'll have my men kill you where you stand. Self-defense, of course. You came armed into a church, threatened an officer of the court. No jury would convict me. Cole laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You really think it's that simple? That you can just kill me and everything goes back to the way it was? I think I've been cleaning up inconvenient problems for 30 years, and you're just another one. Except I'm not alone anymore. There's 30 people outside this church, all of them witnesses to what's happening here. Kill me, and they'll testify. Kill all of us, and you'll have a massacre on your hands that even your bought sheriff can't cover up. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Wexford's face. Those people are cowards. They'll scatter the moment shooting starts. Maybe. Or maybe they're finally angry enough to stand their ground. Cole took a step forward. And here's the thing, Wexford. The ledgers are already gone. Already in the hands of the territorial governor, the federal marshal, and editors at 3 major newspapers. Killing me won't stop what's coming. It'll just add murder to your list of crimes. The color drained from Wexford's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Pastor Mills left this morning with the evidence. Should be in the Capitol by now, handing over every document that proves you're a thief, a murderer, and a tyrant. It's over, Wexford. You just haven't accepted it yet. Wexford's composure shattered. His hand went to the pistol at his belt, drawing it with shaking fingers and pointing it directly at Cole's chest. Then I've got nothing to lose, do I? If I'm going to hang anyway, I might as well have the satisfaction of killing you first. Don't be a fool, Harlan. Deacon Hawthorne's voice cut through the tension. Murder in a church? You'll burn in hell for that. I stopped believing in hell a long time ago, Deacon. Power is the only God that matters, and I've had more of it than any man in this territory. Had being the operative word, Tom Jensen said. It's gone now, Judge. Best thing you can do is surrender peaceable-like. Throw yourself on the mercy of the court. Mercy? Wexford's laugh was wild, unhinged. There's no mercy for men like me. I know what happens to corrupt judges. I've sent enough men to the gallows to know exactly how it ends. He cocked the pistol, his finger tightening on the trigger. If I'm going to die anyway, I'm taking you with me, Granger. Payment for everything you've cost me. Time seemed to slow. Cole saw Wexford's finger tighten, saw the muzzle flash, felt the bullet tear through the air toward his chest. He was already moving, diving to the side, but he knew with terrible clarity that he wasn't fast enough. The second gunshot came from behind Cole, and Wexford staggered backward, his pistol falling from nerveless fingers. A red stain spread across his pristine white shirt, right over his heart. He looked down at it with something like surprise, then his legs buckled and he collapsed to the floor. Cole spun to see Sheriff Morrison standing in the church doorway, his service revolver still smoking in his hand. The sheriff's face was pale, but determined. I couldn't let him do it, Morrison said quietly. Couldn't let him murder a man in cold blood. Not even for him. Not anymore. Wexford's men stood frozen, uncertain what to do now that their employer was bleeding out on the church floor. Morrison leveled his pistol at them. Drop your weapons. All of you. This is over. One by one they complied, guns clattering to the floor. Tom Jensen and his sons moved forward to secure them, while Deacon Hawthorne knelt beside Wexford, checking for a pulse. He's still alive. Barely. Someone get the doctor. Cole ignored the dying judge and rushed to Silas, cutting through the ropes binding his friend. You all right? Been better, but I'll live. Silas spat blood and a tooth onto the floor. Your timing could have been better, though. Another hour and they might have beaten me to death. What happened? We thought you'd made it to Riverside Station. Almost did. They hit us about a mile from town, 6 men on horseback. I tried to fight, but with one arm against 6, he shook his head. They took Vivian first. Told me they'd kill her if I didn't surrender. Didn't have a choice. Vivian approached, tears streaming down her face. She looked at her husband bleeding on the church floor and felt nothing but relief that his reign of terror was finally ending. Morrison holstered his weapon and faced Cole. I'm sorry, Granger, for everything, for being too weak to stand up to him, for looking the other way when he committed crimes, for letting good people suffer because I was too scared to do my job. You just saved my life, Hank. That counts for something. It doesn't erase 20 years of cowardice, but maybe it's a start. Morrison looked down at Wexford. He's dying. Doubt he'll make it an hour, probably for the best, saves us the cost of a trial. What about Lance? Cole asked. Where's his son? As if summoned by the mention of his name, Lance Wexford burst through the church doors, wild-eyed and drunk, a pistol in each hand. He took in the scene, his father dying on the floor, his mother free, armed men surrounding the situation, and let out a roar of pure rage. You did this! You killed him! He pointed both pistols at Cole, his hand shaking. I'm going to kill you, Granger. Going to kill everyone you love, starting with that pregnant bitch you call a wife. The mention of Clara sent ice through Cole's veins. He'd left her alone, in labor, vulnerable. If Lance went to the ranch, Lance must have seen the fear in his eyes because he smiled, vicious and triumphant. That's right. I sent men to your ranch an hour ago. By now they've probably burned it to the ground with her inside. You lose, Granger. You lose everything, just like I did. Cole moved without thinking, drawing his pistol and firing in one smooth motion. The bullet caught Lance in the shoulder, spinning him around. His own pistols discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as he fell, screaming and cursing. But Cole was already running, bursting out of the church and vaulting onto the wagon. He snapped the reins savagely, driving the horses at a reckless gallop through town, his heart hammering with terror. Please, he prayed to any power listening, please let her be safe. Let them both be safe. The ride back to the ranch took forever, and no time at all. As he crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, Cole's worst fears materialized. Smoke rose from the buildings, orange flames visible in the gathering darkness. But it wasn't the house burning, it was the remains of the barn, reignited, and one of the outbuildings. Armed men moved in the yard, at least 4 that Cole could count. They'd surrounded the house, and he could hear them shouting, demanding entry. Cole drove the wagon straight at them, firing his rifle one-handed while steering with the other. The men scattered, returning fire, bullets punching through the wagon bed. Cole leaped down while it was still moving, taking cover behind a water trough and laying down suppressing fire. Get off my land, he roared. Get out or die here. One of the men recognized him and panicked. That's Granger. Lance said he'd be at the church. Lance was wrong. Now run or fight, but make your choice fast. The men chose running, breaking for their horses and thundering away into the darkness. Cole let them go, more concerned with the house than revenge. He sprinted up the porch steps and through the door, shouting Clara's name. The house was intact, undamaged. The men hadn't made it inside yet. Clara must have locked the doors as he'd instructed. But there was no answer to his calls, and the silence terrified him more than gunfire. He took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into their bedroom. The scene that greeted him stopped his heart. Clara lay in the bed, propped up against pillows, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion. Her dress was soaked with blood and sweat, and in her arms, wrapped in a blanket, was the smallest baby Cole had ever seen. A tiny, wrinkled thing with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked just fine based on the wailing filling the room. Benny sat beside his mother on the bed, his face streaked with tears, but his expression proud. "I helped, Cole. Mama told me what to do and I did it. I caught the baby and everything." Cole stood frozen in the doorway, his mind struggling to process the shift from battle to birth, from violence to this fragile miracle. Clara looked up at him, and despite everything, the pain, the fear, the exhaustion, she smiled. "Meet your daughter. Meet Mara." He moved to the bed as if in a dream, sinking down beside her and staring at the impossibly tiny infant in her arms. Mara had stopped crying and was staring up with unfocused eyes, her miniature hand curled into a fist. "She's so small," Cole whispered. "She came early, but she's breathing well, and she's strong, like her father." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Is it over? Did you get them back?" "It's over. Silas and Vivian are safe. Wexford's dead or dying. Lance is wounded and in custody. It's finally over." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. "Then we won. We actually won." Cole wrapped his arms around his family, his wife, his son, and the daughter he'd never thought he'd have. The daughter born too soon into a world of violence, but welcomed into a family that had fought for the right to exist, the right to be safe, the right to build something lasting. "We won," he echoed, "and now we start living." The next few days passed in a blur of recovery and revelation. The territorial governor arrived with federal marshals, drawn by Pastor Mills' testimony and the evidence he'd delivered. They arrested Judge Wexford's remaining associates, shut down his corrupt operations, and began the process of unwinding 20 years of fraud and embezzlement. Wexford himself lingered for 2 days before dying, never regaining consciousness, never facing justice in any earthly court. Lance survived his shoulder wound and was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and a dozen other crimes. He would spend the rest of his life in a territorial prison, his father's money and influence unable to save him. Sheriff Morrison resigned in disgrace but cooperated fully with the investigation, providing testimony that helped convict several of Wexford's hired men. He left the territory quietly, seeking redemption somewhere far from the scenes of his cowardice. Vivian Wexford stayed at the ranch for 2 weeks, helping Clara recover from childbirth and bonding with little Mara. She'd written to her sister in St. Louis, who'd responded with joy and an open invitation to come home. When Vivian finally left on the eastbound stage, she hugged Clara tightly and whispered her thanks for believing in her, for giving her the courage to break free. "Write to me," Clara said. "Let me know you arrived safely, that you're happy." "I will, and you do the same. Tell me about the children growing up, about the ranch thriving. Tell me about good things for a change." The ranch did thrive. With the Wexford threat eliminated, Cole could finally focus on building instead of defending. He repaired the burned barn with help from neighbors who were eager to assist now that fear no longer kept them isolated. The community that had fractured under Wexford's tyranny began to heal, people helping each other, trading freely, living without constant terror. Clara recovered slowly from the difficult birth, and Mara grew stronger each day despite her early arrival. She was a fierce baby, loud and demanding, with Cole's dark eyes and Clara's stubborn determination. Benny doted on his little sister, proud of his role in bringing her into the world and taking his responsibilities as big brother seriously. 3 weeks after the confrontation at the church, a letter arrived from the territorial governor. Cole read it aloud to Clara while she nursed Mara in the rocking chair they'd moved into their bedroom. "The territory extends its profound gratitude for your service in exposing corruption and bringing criminals to justice. An official commendation will be issued, and financial restitution will be provided for damages sustained to your property. Furthermore, the territory recognizes your water rights as valid and inviolate, and has passed legislation protecting them in perpetuity." Clara smiled tiredly. "Does that mean we're safe? Really safe?" "It means we won't spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for the next threat. It means our children can grow up in peace." "Our children," Clara repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Cole set the letter aside and came to kneel beside the rocking chair, placing his hand gently on Mara's tiny head. "I never thought I'd have this again. A A family, a future, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just surviving. Neither did I. I came here lying and desperate, expecting rejection. Instead, I found, she paused, searching for the right words. Home. I found home. He kissed her forehead, then Mara's, then stood and moved to the window. The summer sun blazed down on the ranch, but there was a quality to the light now that spoke of change coming. Soon the brutal heat would give way to autumn's gentler warmth, then winter's cold, and finally spring's renewal. They would face all of it together as a family. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Cole went downstairs to find Silas on the porch, looking better than he had in weeks. The swelling in his face had gone down, revealing the familiar weathered features Clara had come to trust. "Got news," Silas said without preamble. "Tom Jensen just wrote in. Says there's a woman in town asking after the ranch. Young woman, maybe 20, with a black eye and a desperate look about her." Cole's expression hardened. "Nora Wexford." "That'd be my guess. Lance's wife, looking for refuge now that her husband's in prison. What should I do?" Silas shrugged his one shoulder. "That's not my decision to make. But if you're asking my opinion, the girl never did anything wrong except have the bad luck to marry into that family. And we all know what it's like to need someone to throw us a rope when we're drowning." Cole climbed the stairs and found Clara already standing, having heard enough of the conversation. She was still weak, still healing, but her eyes were clear and determined. "Bring her here," Clara said simply. "You sure? You just gave birth 3 weeks ago. You're barely on your feet." "I'm sure. Nobody should have to face what that girl's faced alone. We have room. We have resources. And we have the freedom to choose kindness over fear now." She adjusted Mara in her arms, the baby sleeping peacefully. "Besides, I have a feeling this ranch is going to collect strays and broken things for years to come. Might as well start now." Cole smiled, love and pride swelling in his chest. "You're going to turn this place into a sanctuary, aren't you?" "Maybe. Would that be so bad? A place where people who've been hurt can come to heal, where families can be built from broken pieces, where second chances are real instead of just wishful thinking?" "Sounds perfect to me." An hour later, Nora Wexford arrived in a wagon driven by Tom Jensen. She was younger than Clara had expected, with blonde hair pulled back severely and a face that might have been pretty, if not for the fading bruises and the haunted look in her blue eyes. She climbed down from the wagon slowly, moving like someone who expected violence at any moment. Clara met her on the porch, Mara in her arms, and Benny hovering protectively at her side. "Mrs. Wexford, I'm Clara Granger. This is my husband Cole, my son Benny, and our daughter Mara." Nora stared at the baby, tears welling in her eyes. "I was pregnant once. Lance found out and—" She couldn't finish the sentence, just wrapped her arms around herself. "I have nowhere else to go. My family won't take me back. They got their money from the marriage and they don't care what happened after. I thought maybe... I heard what you did for Vivian. Thought maybe..." "You thought right." Clara shifted Mara to one arm and held out her hand. "You're welcome here, Nora, for as long as you need." "I don't have money. Can't pay you." "Don't need money. But if you want to earn your keep, I could use help with the cooking and cleaning while I recover from childbirth. And Benny needs someone to teach him his letters. Do you read?" Nora nodded, something like hope dawning on her face. "I do. I was a school teacher before I married Lance." "Perfect. Then you'll help educate my son, help me manage the household, and in return you get food, shelter, and safety. Sound fair?" "More than fair. It sounds like a gift." Nora's voice broke. "Thank you. You don't know what this means." "I do know. I was in your place 6 months ago, desperate, pregnant, with nowhere to go and no hope left. Cole gave me a second chance. I'm just passing it forward." They helped Nora settle into the spare bedroom, the same room Vivian had used. Over the following weeks, she slowly came back to life, the haunted look fading from her eyes as she realized she was truly safe. She was gentle with Benny, patient and kind, teaching him letters and numbers with a skill that spoke of genuine talent. She helped Clara with the endless work of running a household, and she held Mara with a wistfulness that spoke of the child she'd lost. By the time autumn arrived, painting the grasslands gold and bringing blessed relief from summer's heat, Granger Creek Ranch had been transformed. The new barn stood tall and sturdy, filled with hay for the coming winter. The pastures were thick with healthy cattle, and the creek ran clear and strong, its water still flowing freely to the communities downstream. The house itself had become something more than just a dwelling. It was a home in the truest sense, filled with voices and laughter, with the cry of an infant and the chatter of a young boy learning his letters, with the companionship of people who'd chosen to build a family from shared hardship and mutual respect. On a cool October evening, Clara stood on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Mara slept against her shoulder, finally peaceful after a fussy afternoon. Cole worked in the distance with Silas, mending a fence before full dark set in. Benny played in the yard with a stick horse Silas had carved for him, his imagination transforming the ranch into a grand adventure. Inside, Nora prepared dinner, humming softly to herself, a sound Clara had never heard from her in those first terrified weeks. This was what they'd fought for, Clara realized. Not just survival, not just revenge against those who'd wronged them. They'd fought for the right to build something lasting and good, to create a place where broken people could heal, where children could grow up safe, where love could flourish despite past pain. Cole appeared at her elbow, sliding his arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far we've come. 6 months ago, I stepped off that stagecoach expecting rejection and shame. Now I'm standing here watching our son play, holding our daughter, living in a home we built together through impossible circumstances." "We did get lucky, didn't we?" Clara laughed. "I wouldn't call being threatened, attacked, and almost killed lucky. But the outcome? Yes. That's lucky. Or blessed. Or earned. Maybe all three." Mara stirred against her shoulder, making soft baby noises. Cole reached over and stroked her tiny head with one calloused finger, his touch impossibly gentle for such a large, rough man. "You know what I think?" he said quietly. "I think we took everything the world threw at us, grief and loss and violence and corruption, and we refused to let it break us. We chose to build instead of destroy, to hope instead of despair. And that's not luck. That's strength. Our strength. Together." "Together," he agreed. As the sun finally dropped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, the family gathered inside for dinner. They sat around the long table that had once known only silence and grief, now filled with conversation and warmth. Benny told elaborate stories about his stick horse adventures. Nora shared memories of her childhood before hardship had stolen her innocence. Silas regaled them with tall tales from his war days that were probably 90% fiction. And Clara sat at the head of the table with Mara in her lap and Cole beside her, surrounded by the family they'd built from impossible circumstances, and felt something she'd thought lost forever. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, because there would always be challenges ahead. Harsh winters and droughts, the normal difficulties of ranch life, the complexity of raising children and maintaining relationships. But peace in the knowledge that whatever came, they would face it together. That they had built something strong enough to weather any storm. Later, after dinner was cleared and Benny tucked into bed with his favorite story told one more time, Cole and Clara sat together in the rocking chair they'd moved to the porch. She held Mara while he held both of them, the three of them watching the stars emerge in full glory above the Wyoming territory. "I love you," Clara said softly. "I don't think I've said it enough, but I do. I love you, Cole Granger, for seeing past my lies to the truth underneath, for giving me and Benny a home, for being brave enough to fight for us, for all of it. I love you too. You saved me, you know, from grief, from rage, from becoming the kind of man Wexford was, consumed by revenge and bitterness. You gave me a reason to build instead of destroy." He kissed the top of her head. "You and Benny and Mara, you're my second chance at life. I don't take that lightly." Mara chose that moment to wake fully, her face scrunching up in preparation for a wail. Clara laughed and shifted her, preparing to nurse. "She's going to be a handful, this one. Already knows exactly what she wants and isn't afraid to demand it. Takes after her mother, then. And her father, stubborn runs in this family." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds Mara nursing contentedly and the distant call of coyotes in the grasslands. The ranch spread out before them in the darkness, their land, their home, their future. Months turned to years, and Granger Creek Ranch became known throughout the territory not just for its water rights or its successful cattle operation, but for something else entirely. It became known as a place of refuge, a sanctuary for those who needed second chances. A widow with 3 children and nowhere to go found employment and housing there, her oldest son eventually becoming one of Cole's best ranch hands. A former soldier with no legs and no prospects discovered he had a gift for bookkeeping and took over managing the ranch's accounts. Women fleeing abusive husbands, children orphaned by disease or violence, men broken by war or hardship. They all found their way to Granger Creek at one time or another, and all were welcomed. Not all stayed. Some healed enough to move on, to build lives elsewhere with the confidence and resources the Grangers helped them acquire. But many did stay, becoming part of the extended family that grew around Clara and Cole's original household. Benny grew into a capable young man who could track like his adoptive father and had his mother's gift for seeing the truth in people. Mara grew fierce and wild, a child of the frontier who could ride before she could read properly and who challenged every restriction placed on her as a girl. 2 more children followed, a son born 2 years after Mara, named after Silas, and a daughter 3 years after that. The ranch prospered. The community that had been fractured by Wexford's corruption rebuilt itself into something stronger, bound together by shared hardship, overcome, and collective determination to never let tyranny take root again. And through it all, through the seasons that turned and the years that passed, Cole and Clara built a marriage that was partnership in the truest sense. They fought sometimes, both too stubborn and strong-willed to always agree. But they always came back together, always chose each other, always remembered that they'd survived worse than any argument could throw at them. On their 10th anniversary, they stood in the same spot where Clara had first confessed her lies, where Cole had offered her mercy she hadn't expected. The ranch had changed dramatically in a decade. More buildings, more people, more life. But the core of it remained the same. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked, his arm around her waist as they watched their children play in the distance. "Lying your way onto that stagecoach, coming here with nothing but desperation and hope?" Claire considered the question seriously. "I regret the circumstances that forced me to it. Samuel's abandonment, my family's cruelty, the desperation that made lying seem like my only option. But regret coming here? Regret finding you, building this life, creating this family?" She turned to face him, placing her hands on his chest. "Never. Not for a single moment." "Good. Because I don't regret taking a chance on a pregnant woman with a questionable past and a talent for deception." His smile was warm, the grief that had once defined him replaced by contentment hard-won through years of choosing hope over despair. "Best decision I ever made." They kissed there in the golden afternoon light, 2 people who'd both been broken by life and had chosen to heal together, to build something lasting from the wreckage of their pasts. And as the sun set over Granger Creek Ranch on another perfect autumn evening, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, their children's laughter echoed across the land they'd fought so hard to protect. It was the sound of innocence preserved, of safety earned, of a future secured through impossible courage and unwavering love. The desperate woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach with nothing but lies and hope had found more than she'd ever dared dream. A home, a family, a purpose, and a love that proved second chances weren't just possible, but could become the foundation for something truly extraordinary. And the grieving man who'd been ready to let rage consume him had discovered that opening his heart to a stranger's desperate truth could lead to redemption, to joy, to a life worth living, not despite the pain of the past, but because of the strength it had forged. Together, they had won, not just against corruption and violence, but against despair itself. They had built a sanctuary from ashes, a family from strangers, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, proof that even in the harshest landscape, even after the deepest losses, love and courage could still make something beautiful grow.